Chapter 352. When it was almost dawn, it finally turned into heavy rain after a whole day. The rolling thunder roared wantonly in the sky. It was windy and hooting. The rain became heavier and heavier, and finally became a rainstorm that was extremely rare and hooting. The rainstorm engulfed the whole city. In the dim lights, the crazy rain seemed to be the only sound in the whole city. In the pouring rain, a white-haired Xian Xuanzi, wearing a light blue Taoist robe, holding a horsetail whisk in one hand and an umbrella in the other, walked quietly on the road to the top of Mount Dong. Mount Dong was known as the back garden of the whole Huading. There were many mansions and scenic spots, so the road was extremely smooth. However, it was a rainy day and it was late at night. The smooth mountain road was still slippery. Xian Xuanzi walked very slowly, but his footsteps were extremely firm. It was raining heavily. In a blue Taoist robe and a black umbrella, he walked alone in the dark night because of the heavy rain. His figure was like an inconspicuous black spot. There were many mansions on Mount Dong. However, Xian Xuanzi did not go to any mansion, but went straight to the top of the mountain. The mountain road looked more and more serene in the heavy rain. The top of the mountain looked distant and cold. Xian Xuanzi walked forward unhurriedly. He did not walk fast, but his pace was the same and never slowed down. The top of the mountain lit up with a vague and hazy light in the heavy rain. The light illuminated a small, ancient and solemn building. Xian Xuanzi's calm face looked a little weird in the night. He knew what the building was illuminated by the light. The building, with a history of hundreds of years, could be regarded as the holy land of the southeast coast for some people with faith. Xian Xuanzi also had faith, but he believed in the three pure ones. And the top of the mountain, it was a church. The most famous Zhongshan Cathedral on the top of Mount Dong. The place illuminated by the light was the destination of Xian Xuanzi's trip. Xian Xuanzi walked closer and closer. The light swayed in the wind and rain, illuminating the bell tower of the church in the heavy rain. Xian Xuanzi stood calmly in front of the church. The European-style church, the sage-like Taoist priest, the black umbrella in the rain and the light on the bell tower. The rain poured down and the wind blew past. In the darkness of the night, this scene looked strange yet harmonious. Xian Xuanzi took a deep breath, pushed open the half-closed door and walked in. He put the black umbrella at the door casually, and the water stains soaked the ground that had not been hit by the rain. The space inside the bell tower was very small. The cross was placed in the center of the bell tower. The lights in the bell tower were on, illuminating everything inside. Xian Xuanzi entered the church and the bell tower. The white horsetail whisk hung in his hands, and his Taoist robe was neat and tidy. As he stood in the bell tower, the atmosphere became increasingly strange. But what was even stranger was that there wasn't a Taoist priest in this Catholic church. In front of the cross, there was even a monk dressed in a monk's robe. Bald head, Buddhist beads, monk robes, all these were even more conspicuous than Xian Xuanzi's outfit. The two of them stared at each other across the cross. The scene was incongruous to the extreme. It's been 3 years, but the Heavenly King's demeanor is still the same as before. Congratulations. The monk looked at Xian Xuanzi with a meaningful smile, without the tranquility and peace of a monk. Xian Xuanzi suddenly raised his eyebrows. Heavenly King. That was how Xian Xuanzi addressed him, not as a Taoist priest. In terms of seniority, he was of the same generation as Xian Xuanzi's master. In this situation, although Buddhism and Taoism were different, Xian Xuanzi deserved to be called martial uncle. But Xian Xuanzi called him Heavenly King. He was indeed a Heavenly King now, the 13th Heavenly King of Samsara Palace that few people knew. Your master and I are of the same generation. Xian Xuanzi narrowed his eyes and said indifferently. My master is gone, so you are no longer an elder. Is it wrong for me to call you Heavenly King? The monk's eyes were sharp, with clear aggression. Yes. Xian Xuanzi was silent for a while before he said calmly, Are you Ruzhen or Rui? He knew that great master Wu Wei had 2 disciples, and he had even seen them more than once, but he had never seriously remembered their Buddhist names before. I'm Ruzhen. The monk put his palms together and saluted. Are you here tonight for revenge? Xian Xuanzi's eyes were a little strange with self-mockery. 3 years ago, I stabbed the horsetail whisk into Wu Wei's heart with my own hands. Are you here for this cause and effect? Heavenly King, you misunderstood me. Ruzhen insisted on calling Xian Xuanzi with a smile, impeccable. Xian Xuanzi smiled and looked at the rain through the window of the bell tower. The winter mountain under the rain was full of vitality. He narrowed his eyes and said softly, How do you know my contact information? I can contact the military counselor. Ruzhen said lightly, You are now the Heavenly King of Samsara. I can contact the military counselor so I can find you. Xian Xuanzi said casually. Who is the military counselor? Ruzhen was silent as expected and reasonable. Xian Xuanzi said coldly, since you don't believe me, why do you come to me? Heavenly King owes my Qingyun temple a cause and effect. Ruzhen's tone also became cold. 3 years ago, Xian Xuanzi went to Qingyun temple to visit Great Master Wu Wei and directly stabbed the horsetail whisk in his hand into Great Master Wu Wei's heart. Great Master Wu Wei died to fulfill Li Tianlan's wish. But Xian Xuanzi's original actions could be regarded as the cause of a series of events. In the end, you just want revenge, don't you? Xian Xuanzi laughed sarcastically. If you want revenge, you can't live until now. Ruzhen said unceremoniously, I'm looking for you today just to ask you to return a cause and effect to Qingyun Temple. Just say it. Xian Xuanzi said expressionlessly. Ruzhen hesitated and said calmly, Heavenly King, please extend a person's life. Oh. Xian Xuanzi asked. Qin Weibai. My little junior sister, your current boss. Ruzhen told the truth. She will die? Xian Xuanzi suddenly raised his voice. The reason why he joined the Samsara Palace was that Qin Weibai promised him that she would return his daughter's freedom when Kunlun City was destroyed. But now Qin Weibai was going to die? Xian Xuanzi suddenly felt a little angry. He didn't know what he was angry about. If you are willing to help, she won't die. Ruzhen said calmly. Xian Xuanzi was so angry that he laughed. He snorted heavily and said in a gloomy tone, I can't even see her destiny. Extend her life? Oh, will you teach me? Ruzhen was silent. Facing Xian Xuanzi's cold eyes, he slowly took out a Buddha bead. This bead is called death substitution. Ruzhen said calmly, with it, Heavenly King can help. Death substitution. In Lin, and Ruzhen also gave Qin Weibai a Buddha bead and told her that it was called death substitution. But there was no doubt that this one was the real death substitution bead. And the one he gave Qin Weibai was called mortal fate. Ruzhen didn't even need to speculate anything. He could be completely sure that at this time, the mortal fate was already with Li Tianlan. Qin Weibai thought that it was a chance to die for her. With how much she cherished and valued Li Tianlan, how could she be willing to use such a precious opportunity herself? She must give it to Li Tianlan. Only with Li Tianlan could Qin Weibai's mortal fate not be destroyed. In this way he could extend Qin Weibai's life with the real death substitution bead. That was possible. Death substitution? Xian Xuanzi muttered to himself and his eyes narrowed. Is it the Buddha's relic of that senior? It's the Grand Master's relic. Ruzhen nodded and handed the Buddha bead to Xian Xuanzi. I didn't expect there to be such a thing. Xian Xuanzi sighed with some disbelief and then said with some doubt, if there was this thing, Wu Wei wouldn't have died at all. Why? Master said 3 years ago that he could live but he had to die. There was finally a trace of sadness in Ruzhen's eyes. Great Master Wu Wei might be the only one who knew Qin Weibai's origin, and because of this he could see the future. Before he left death substitution and mortal fate. He seemed to have arranged everything today quietly. He could not die because of the death substitution bead. He had to die. In addition to fulfilling Li Tianlan's wish, it was more to leave Qin Weibai the last glimmer of life. Another fool who actively seeks death. Xian Xuanzi thought of Great Master Wu Wei and muttered to himself. Ruzhen didn't speak. Is it worth it? Xian Xuanzi asked. Is it worth it for an adopted daughter who is not your biological daughter? Ruzhen looked silent. What is Qin Weibai's origin? Xian Xuanzi looked at Ruzhen and said, Wu Wei erased all traces for her. As for her origin, it was also well hidden. The Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, and Zhongzhou State have investigated, but they found nothing. Do you know? She came from a small mountain village in the southwest. Xian Xuanzi said flatly, when Master met my junior sister, I was there. That year there was a blizzard in the southwest and junior sister was lying in the snow. She looked to be about 6 or 7 years old, and her body was covered in blood. Both her internal and external injuries were fatal, but she was very conscious. When we discovered her, she also discovered us. He paused and said strangely, she just looked at her. You couldn't imagine her injuries at that time. Her internal organs were all severely damaged, and it was as if someone had crushed her bones and torn her muscles. It was as if the person who wanted to kill her wanted to torture her in the cruelest way possible, and then casually threw her into the snow to freeze her to death. But she didn't have any fear or pain in that kind of injury and situation. When we found her, she just looked at us calmly, and it could even be said that she was examining us. He shook his head in disbelief. Later, Master took my junior sister back and took good care of her for more than a year. Then she slowly got better. But you still tell me that she came from a small mountain village in the southwest? Qian Xuanzi asked. We did pick up my junior sister in a mountainous area in the southwest. I don't know her origin. Only Master and my junior sister know it. Ruzhen shook his head and said, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to know this to prolong her life. Prolong her life? Qian Xuanzi's tone was complicated. What if I don't agree? Ruzhen didn't answer this question but said calmly, this place is very important in the intelligence of Samsara Palace. It is said that several private priests are secret pawns of Kunlun City. It's a good place. It's surrounded by rich people. Maybe some secrets can be exposed when someone prays. Even if there are no secrets, it's a good place to build a stronghold here. Ruzhen looked at Qian Xuanzi, whose expression changed a little, and said slowly, I asked you to meet and you asked me to wait for you here. I'm afraid you don't just want to see me, do you? I heard that Gu Xingyun came to Huading with his daughter and Gu Qianchuan. Qian Xuanzi's face was completely gloomy. I won't do anything. If you don't agree, I won't leave. It's you who will have a hard time, and it has nothing to do with me. If you die, you'll pay back the karma. Ruzhen's smile was a little cold. But the problem is, as the only metaphysics grandmaster left in Zhongzhou state, are you willing to die? Qian Xuanzi's lips trembled fiercely. Of course he was unwilling to die. Not for the so-called status and reputation but for his daughter and granddaughter. Even if I'm willing to take action, it's too late today. There's not enough time. Qian Xuanzi took a deep breath and clenched the death scapegoat bead in his hand. Enough time. Ruzhen said calmly, just right. Not enough time. Qian Xuanzi was a little irritable. The death scapegoat bead also needs someone to die for it. Where is the person? To die for Qin Weibai, it must be someone who has something to do with her. If the person is not here, then other arrangements are needed. There's not enough time. There's no need for other arrangements. Ruzhen said softly. All of Qian Xuanzi's words suddenly stopped. He looked straight at Ruzhen. Ruzhen laughed. She's my little junior sister. I have something to do with her, right? In Lin and Qin Weibai asked him about his future plans. He said that everything was up to fate. Tonight, in the bell tower of this church, this was his fate. Qian Xuanzi then understood why Ruzhen, who had been out of this world, was so unworldly tonight. Ruzhen slowly sat on the ground. I have nothing to worry about. He said, come on. I want to serve my master as soon as possible. The storm outside the bell tower did not stop at all. A fire lit up in the bell tower. The fire flickered and flickered, flickering. Time passed slowly. The mountain road in the heavy rain in winter mountain lit up. A row of Mercedes cars passed through the heavy rain at night and slowly stopped in front of the church. Gu Xingyun got out of the car alone, looked up at the light of the bell tower, and turned to look at the girl who got out of another car. You go up with me. Gu Xingyun glanced at the girl and said calmly. The light in the bell tower seemed to dim a little. Qian Xuanzi sat alone in the bell tower, and his face was a little pale. The death scapegoat bead in his hand had completely disappeared. Ruzhen. It also disappeared. Only some dust was floating in the air and finally fell to the ground. It was blown away by the wind outside the window and disappeared. Qian Xuanzi Wuwei. In addition, Ruzhen, a real eminent monk, finally used a death scapegoat bead to exchange for a trace of Qin Weibai's earthly fate. Another fool. Qian Xuanzi whispered. There were footsteps outside the bell tower. The door of the attic was pushed open. Gu Xingyun's figure appeared at the door. Behind him was a girl who was about 20 years old. A picturesque young girl with a beauty that could topple cities. The girl was tall and slender, and her face was delicate and beautiful. She wore a light green dress, and her eyes were bright and beautiful. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, and every move she made was filled with the liveliness and charm of youth. She was very obedient and gentle. She stood there casually, but for a moment she seemed to suppress the light. Vaguely, she had a kind of charm that could steal people's souls. Gu Xingyun stared at the girl, and the corners of his mouth were trembling. Unconsciously, his face was already covered with tears. Qingqing, this is Grandpa. Gu Xingyun looked at Qian Xuanzi and said calmly. Chapter 353. As the heir of the Wang family of Beihai and one of the most eye-catching protagonists of the maneuver of the two academies, Wang Xingxiao knew the content of the maneuver even faster than Dongqing Wudi. The special warfare system in the Dark World had always been absolutely fair and absolutely unfair. In this field where strength was respected and all rules were primitive and rough, absolute privileges also had the capital to be more unimpeded and even unscrupulous than in other fields. What Wang Xingxiao got was not an official document, but a temporarily printed fax. The pale gold city representing the emblem of Kunlun City on the fax was still clear, looking majestic and solemn. The frenzied torrential rain pounded the whole city. In the luxury suite on the top floor of the Huading chief mansion, Wang Xingxiao, who had just taken a bath and was wearing a bathrobe, looked at the pale gold city on the fax with cold and sarcastic eyes. There was only the emblem of Kunlun City on the fax, without the signatures of the office of the president and the cabinet. It could be seen that as soon as this information was sent out of Kunlun City, it was immediately sent to Huading, even at the same speed as it was sent to the office of the president and the cabinet. When countless big shots in Zhongzhou State, including the presidents of the two academies, did not know the rules and content of the final maneuver, Wang Xingxiao had read the information twice. The information approved by Kunlun City was not complicated, and the content was relatively simple. It was about the content and rules of the final maneuver of the two academies. The content was almost the same as the rules of every previous maneuver. The only change was just a few words, and they were concentrated on the first line of the first page. But the change of just a few words was enough to make the final maneuver extraordinary. Wang Xingxiao threw the information in his hand aside, his face indifferent. The subtle changes in the information were undoubtedly extremely beneficial to him, but there was no joy in his expression, only a trace of subtle but real sarcasm. It's superfluous. I have a guilty conscience. He glanced at the information on the table and whispered to himself. What's superfluous? A hoarse but extremely sexy voice sounded behind Wang Xingxiao. Song Ci, who was also in a bathrobe, came over, tilted her head, and wiped her long hair with a towel. Wang Xingxiao moved his body. Song Ci sat in Wang Xingxiao's arms and handed him the towel. You help me. Kunlun City has already set the rules for the final maneuver of the two academies. It's ridiculous. Wang Xingxiao carefully wiped Song Ci's long hair and said in a calm tone. From his angle, Song Ci's slender neck and beautiful side face were clearly visible. After the passion faded, there was still a flush on her face, which made her lonely and indifferent aura dissipate a lot, making her look charming and languid. Song Ci picked up the document and glanced at it. She suddenly raised her eyebrows and chuckled. So exaggerated? She saw the first detailed rule at first glance. The minute changes that were enough to affect the overall situation were all in the first one. I really don't know how nervous Kunlun City is to come up with such a rule. Song Ci didn't continue to read. She threw the materials aside, sat in Wang Xingxiao's arms, and put her arms around his neck. They can't afford to lose. Wang Xingxiao put his arms around Song Ci's slender waist without any excess fat and shook his head. The short rise time is still the most obvious weakness of Kunlun City. If Gu Hanshan loses to Li Tianlan in the final maneuver, the reputation of Kunlun City is bound to be greatly affected. The key is that Li Tianlan's identity is too sensitive. He's the heir of the Li family. If Gu Hanshan loses, it's tantamount to telling everyone that even if the Gu family overthrew the Li family and became the war god clan of Zhongzhou State, they will never catch up with the Li family. But what Kunlun City is doing now may not be very glorious, and they even dragged you into it. Why did Uncle Wang agree? Song Ci was a little confused. She looked at Wang Xingxiao, whose face was a little ugly, and twisted her body subtly in his arms. Feeling the change of his face, Song Ci laughed. It was not coquettish, but with a kind of indescribable wildness. Behave yourself. Wang Xingxiao slapped Song Ci's plump buttocks, shook his head and said, I think my father should be tired of continuing to entangle with the Li family. Kunlun City wants to drag me into this, but they are the masterminds after all. This time the impact on the Wang family of Beihai is not big, and the impact mainly depends on the result. If we lose, Kunlun City's action this time is because they have a guilty conscience. But if we win and guide them well this time, the cooperation between Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai will be like a lion fighting a rabbit, and the impact may not be so bad. Song Ci casually played with a strand of her black hair, thinking without saying a word. When thinking about problems, Song Ci was like an unsheathed sword, shining brightly. Even in front of Wang Xingxiao, her elegance was still not reduced. I can get this information, so Gu Hanshan must have gotten it earlier than me. Wang Xingxiao put his arms around Song Ci and said calmly, he should be here soon. So soon? Song Ci was a little surprised. Kunlun City is so nervous, so Gu Hanshan must be more nervous. What's the rainstorm outside the window? If we can nail Li Tianlan this time, Even if it's a knife outside, he will come here as soon as possible. Wang Xingxiao said in a sarcastic tone. Song Ci looked at Wang Xingxiao. She sensed his emotions. You don't like this rule? Song Ci asked. I just don't think it's necessary. Wang Xingxiao shook his head. It's superfluous. Gu Hanshan doesn't deserve to join hands with me. This sentence Wang Xingxiao said straightforwardly. His face was calm, but his eyebrows were full of loftiness. Song Ci looked at Wang Xingxiao quietly, her eyes soft and a little surprised. Before Li Tianlan appeared, Gu Hanshan was the only one of the younger generation who could be compared with Wang Xingxiao. The wind and thunder veins and the heavenly king heart had their own advantages and disadvantages. Song Ci never thought that Wang Xingxiao would look down on Gu Hanshan so much. What do you think of Gu Hanshan? Song Ci asked softly. The Gu family's heritage is actually not shallow, but its foundation is not deep. Its inheritance is top-notch but slightly mediocre. Gu Hanshan is too obsessed and narrow-minded. He has the heavenly king heart, but it's difficult for him to exert his potential. He's far inferior to me. Wang Xingxiao said without thinking. What about Li Tianlan? Song Ci asked softly. Wang Xingxiao looked hesitant. Amazing talent. In any era, Li Tianlan can be said to be the kind of person with unparalleled talent. There are too many fetters ahead of him. It's not easy to rebuild the Li family. He wants too much. Although the Li family is making a comeback, Li Tianlan's road has not really begun. Since he entered the secular world, he has been dormant for 3 years after the final battle of Heaven Capital. What does he want in his style of doing? Now he has no chance to show it at all, and I don't know. If he can win the final maneuver, he will have a little chance to exert his revenge. Wang Xingxiao said slowly, speaking of Li Tianlan himself, he is a very pure person, and his boldness in martial arts is beyond the reach of ordinary people. If I were him, I would be inferior to him and he would be inferior to me. Song Ci looked at Wang Xingxiao with a smile in her eyes and eyebrows. She liked this kind of Wang Xingxiao who commented on his future enemies in a straightforward and confident manner. He never overestimated others or despised his opponents. When he talked about others, he was always measuring himself. That was a kind of boldness and broad-mindedness that could look at the whole world. He might not be as pure as Li Tianlan, but this kind of Wang Xingxiao was what the Wang family of Beihai needed most. Otherwise he would not have said that if their roles were reversed he would be inferior to Li Tianlan, and Li Tianlan would be inferior to him. The doorbell rang. Look, it's coming, Wang Xingxiao said with a chuckle. Song Ci stood up in Wang Xingxiao's arms and stretched lazily. I'm going back to my room to sleep. Wang Xingxiao also stood up and nodded casually. Song Ci returned to the room in a bathrobe. Wang Xingxiao, who was also in a bathrobe, opened the door. Gu Hanshan, the young master of Kunlun City, stood outside with a light smile. Compared to my disturbance tonight, I think the news we just received is the most important. Of course. Wang Xingxiao laughed. Facing Gu Hanshan, he was no longer as unhappy as when he had just received the news. This is a good thing, he said with an extremely sincere expression. Gu Hanshan also held a piece of information that was exactly the same as Wang Xingxiao's. When he heard Wang Xingxiao's statement, he seemed to be slightly relieved. He walked into the suite, sat on the luxurious sofa in the living room and went straight to the point. So let's join hands? I totally agree. Wang Xingxiao smiled, but he sighed softly in his heart. In fact, putting aside the past of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family, he did not have a bad impression of Li Tianlan. If it were Li Tianlan sitting here tonight, he might be happier. But in Jianghu, who could do whatever he wanted. It was all involuntary. I've watched many videos of Li Tianlan's moves. Jiang Shangyu and I have analyzed it and finally come to a conclusion. Gu Hanshan sat on the sofa and said in a calm tone. Wang Xingxiao listened attentively. The swordsmanship of the Li family is broad and profound, and the 24 moves of sword are all-encompassing. So in our current realm, we can hardly see any weakness in Li Tianlan's sword intent. Gu Hanshan said slowly, Li Tianlan's weakness is his body. After the Battle of Heaven Capital he started from scratch. In 3 years he has today's combat capability. Not to mention whether his realm is stable or not, at least his body can't bear his progress. So if I'm right, Li Tianlan's wind and thunder veins should not exist. His current sword intent is extremely fierce and pure, but it's too hard and easy to break. His attack is powerful, but his defense must be extremely weak, even beyond imagination. This is Li Tianlan's weakness, the most fatal weakness. Wang Xingxiao nodded thoughtfully, but he did not speak. Gu Hanshan waited for a long time and finally couldn't help but ask, "What do you think?" "I agree with your speculation," Wang Xingxiao said calmly. "In terms of sword intent, I'm not as good as him, but in terms of physical strength, he's not as good as me." He pointed to the information brought by Gu Hanshan and said with a chuckle, "So in this final maneuver, he won't have any chance." Gu Hanshan also laughed, carefree and wantonly. When Gu Hanshan arrived at the chief mansion and conspired with Wang Xingxiao in the East Emperor Palace, Li Tianlan, who was about to rest with Dongqing Rushi, also received a call from Zhuang Huayang, the dean of the Sky Academy. "Tianlan, are you asleep?" On the phone, Zhuang Huayang's voice was a little drowsy, as if he had just woken up from a dream. "I'm about to sleep." Li Tianlan smiled, but his hand slid down Dongqing Rushi's neckline and held her soft and plump breasts, which were like mutton fat warm jade. Dongqing Rushi's little face was red. She leaned against Li Tianlan and pressed her head against his chest, her body trembling slightly. "I received a message here, but the specific documents haven't been sent yet. I think it's necessary to tell you." Zhuang Huayang smiled and said in a serious tone. Li Tianlan had almost never heard Zhuang Huayang speak in this tone. He frowned, reached out his hand from Dongqing Rushi's collar and said calmly, "Principal, go ahead." Zhuang Huayang did not speak for a while. Dongqing Rushi, who was leaning on him, was still pressing her head against Li Tianlan. From the moment Li Tianlan put his claws in, she had been pushing against it. Now that he pulled his claws out, the daughter of the Dongqing clan was still pushing against it, even harder and harder. Li Tianlan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He got out of bed. Dongqing Rushi, whose hair was a little messy, raised her head and stared at Li Tianlan with hazy eyes. "It's like this," Zhuang Huayang finally said. "The rules of the final maneuver have been determined, as well as the sequence of the maneuver." Li Tianlan seemed to realize something and narrowed his eyes. "What is the content of the first drill?" He took the initiative to ask. This time, Zhuang Huayang was silent for a long time before he slowly said, "It's a tactical drill, teamwork, and reconnaissance." His voice was very soft, but the meaning behind it was extremely rich. Li Tianlan finally sneered. "Kunlun City is really bold." Tactical drills, reconnaissance, and camouflage were all very normal drill subjects. The first item, which was also the initial content of the maneuver of the two academies, focused on teamwork. The focus of teamwork was on teamwork. Teamwork was the finale of the final maneuver of the two academies in any session. It was extremely important. It was a collision of teams. Li Tianlan had almost no team now. When Li Beidian and the others were seriously injured, he only had Dongqing Rushi and Du Hanin by his side. What he was going to face was the phantom world of Wang Xingxiao and Song Xiai. It was the 3000 world of Gu Hanshan and Jiang Shangyu. There were also many teams attached to the phantom world and the 3000 world. Simply speaking, on the first day of the maneuver, Li Tianlan would face the cooperation of several super teams. "I got it." Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said blandly. Zhuang Huayang wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he silently hung up the phone. He knew very well what the main purpose of the office of the president agreeing to this plan was. Li Tianlan was an ally of the academics. After all, not all allies were completely close. Li Tianlan hung up the phone and did not speak for a long time. Dongqing Rushi, who quietly took off her pajamas and hid her body in the quilt, said softly, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Li Tianlan laughed. For the first time since he came back from the polar region, his eyes became so sharp and brilliant. "I just suddenly decided on one thing." "What?" Dongqing Rushi asked. "You can join the East Emperor Palace. But on the day of the final maneuver, I hope you and Du Hanin can abstain." Li Tianlan said slowly, word by word. His eyes changed like a messy rainstorm, like a blazing wildfire. Wind, frost, rain, snow, the scorching sun and stars alternated repeatedly in his eyes, and finally turned into determination. The final maneuver was his first step to the stage of Zhongzhou State. Now Li Honghe had fallen from the invincible realm. Qin Weibai and Situ Cangyue went to Snow Country. Outside the maneuver, the only one he could rely on was Lin Fengting. But in the maneuver, no matter what he had to face. Chapter 354. For nearly a decade in Zhongzhou State, there had always been a saying in the military that was unpresentable but taken for granted. The Border Praetorian Corps, known as the most elite super-large comprehensive corps in Zhongzhou State, could even be said to be the private army of the Dongqing clan. In the beginning, Zhongzhou State had secretly called it the Dongqing Corps, but after receiving different degrees of warnings, everyone realized how powerful it was. So the saying of the Dongqing Corps gradually disappeared and was replaced by another name, the God of Massacre Corps. This was tantamount to saying that the Border Control Corps was Dongqing Wudi's own corps. But after some meaningful and clear remarks were missing, this name was finally acquiesced by all parties. It was true, at least infinitely close. The Border Control Corps was known as the small military headquarters of Zhongzhou State. After the first commander Li Guangtu committed treason, the Border Control Corps naturally began to change from the original small-scale special warfare agency to a military force, and eventually formed a behemoth with a total number of nearly 600,000 troops today. There were 5 trump card armies in the Border Control Corps, namely Thunderbolt, Pegasus, Bloodbath, Wild Sand and Black Dragon, which were stationed in Nanyun, 3 provinces in the east, Tibet and Beijiang. They had great influence. In addition, there were 4 independent airborne divisions, 2 special investigation brigades, nearly 20 flying formations, 1 intelligence department, and 6 special warfare brigades. All the institutions were in order. With such strength, even in the whole dark world, it could be called a giant. This was also the capital for Dongqing Wudi to be domineering in Zhongzhou State. For the entire Border Control Corps, Dongqing Wudi, who was not in the invincible realm, was like a god, sacred and majestic. He was the spiritual symbol of the whole corps. The 4 commanders promoted by Dongqing Wudi, Wang Wanyan of the Bloodbath Battalion, Shi Hanbing of the Wild Sand Battalion, Xiao Dongzhan of the Pegasus Battalion, and Cheng Huaining of the Black Dragon Battalion, were the pillars of the Border Control Corps. The middle and high-level officers were the foundation of the pillar, and the elite soldiers were the cornerstone of the corps. This was an unbreakable and great whole. It was famous for 2 iron rules, which had now almost become the soul of the Border Control Corps. The first rule was that as long as the Border Control Corps could still fight, the officers must be at the forefront when charging without destroying their own formation. The officers must be at the end when retreating. The marshal was at the forefront, followed by the general, followed by the colonel, and then the lieutenant. The second rule was that under no circumstances would the Border Control Corps keep any captives. Dongqing Wudi once said something that shocked the whole Zhongzhou State: "My soldiers are fighting, not King staying behind to look after children." That's what he said, and that's what he did. Dongqing Wudi had been in charge of the Border Control Corps for more than 20 years. There had been countless border conflicts with the superpowers in the Dark World, India, Snow Country, Annan State and Gaoshan. No one who made an enemy out of him would survive. Every time they charged, he, dressed in the marshal's uniform, would take the lead and be the last to retreat. With such a marshal, every time the Border Control Corps fought, hundreds of thousands of troops in the Border Control Corps would follow Dongqing Wudi's sword. For more than 20 years, he had forged the fiercest and strongest military soul in the entire Zhongzhou State with the name of God of Massacre. He was invincible and invincible for Zhongzhou State. For decades, Dongqing Wudi was definitely the best commander. A soldier who could make an army of 600,000 die for him. The word great was enough to describe it. Because of his greatness, Dongqing Wudi had a heavier responsibility. Heavier responsibility meant more weighing and thinking. Therefore, Dongqing Wudi was under a lot of pressure, as heavy as a mountain. A few hours had passed since the call with Ning Ziyuan, and Dongqing Wudi still hadn't left the building of the army headquarters. The night in Yuzhou was quiet and solemn. He pushed open the window of the office, and the sultry wind blew in, sweeping away a lot of pungent smoke. Dongqing Wudi squinted at the night sky and remained silent. Bai Qingzhao, the Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters, still stayed in the office, accompanying Dongqing Wudi in silence. "Minister, have you thought it through?" In the long silence, Bai Qingzhao suddenly asked. The office was very quiet. So his voice was hoarse, which even he found harsh. Dongqing Wudi's body seemed to shake. Bai Qingzhao was his brother-in-law. Even though he and Bai Qingqian had been in a cold war for many years, they were still close friends. Most of the time, Bai Qingzhao would not call him by his title but by his name. Now he called him minister. It could be seen how important Dongqing Wudi's next decision was, especially for the relationship between the Bai family and the Dongqing clan. The document of Kunlun City with the seals of the office of the president and the cabinet was still on the desk. The content of the first maneuver in the document was extremely dazzling. Teamwork. Without thinking at all, Dongqing Wudi knew what Li Tianlan would face in the final maneuver. He would face Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, Jiang Shangyu, Song Xiai and others plus their team. Most of the main forces of the East Emperor Palace were seriously injured. Even if the East Emperor Palace was in its heyday with Li Tianlan, it would be difficult to face such a lineup. Li Tianlan seemed to be doomed. Whether he could survive the final maneuver and make a comeback, the Li family, which was still alone, could not decide. Sai City, which had lost its strength, and the murderous weapon-setting sun, could not decide. Samsara Palace, which was out of reach, could not decide. Only the giant group and Dongqing Wudi had the power and strength to intervene in the final maneuver. As for the academics and the office of the president, they agreed to the document and were waiting for Dongqing Wudi's decision. Bai Qingzhao looked at Dongqing Wudi's back. His eyes were extremely complicated. At the beginning of the month, his father, Bai Zhanfeng, and his sister, Bai Qingqian, went to Zhongyuan together. As one of the core members of the Bai family, Bai Qingzhao naturally knew the reason. Li Tianlan's life and death now seemed to be decided in the final maneuver, but in fact, it was in the hands of Dongqing Wudi. No one would doubt that the Dongqing clan did not have this power. As long as Dongqing Wudi was willing to pay the price, not to mention a few young people, even if Gu Xingyun recovered from his injury and joined hands with Wang Tianzong, Li Tianlan would not die. But Dongqing Wudi's willingness or unwillingness was a swing between family and country. I'm still waiting for news from Ziyuan. Dongqing Wudi said slowly. Does it make sense? Bai Qingzhao said in a low voice. Ning Ziyuan has a deep foundation in the Eastern Theater of Operations, but if he leaves that position, it will be difficult for him to control this maneuver. He will make efforts, but his strength is definitely not enough to turn the tide. You know this. Dongqing Wudi smiled bitterly. Between family and country. He muttered to himself, and his smile was full of bitterness. Anyone who broke the rules would have to pay the price. Kunlun City changed the order of the final maneuver and increased the casualty rate. But all of this was within the scope of Kunlun City's power, that was, within the scope permitted by the rules. If Dongqing Wudi wanted to intervene in the final maneuver, it was tantamount to breaking the rules, so he must pay the price. Just like Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai failed to attack Li Honghe and could only watch the Li family make a comeback, whether they were willing or not. Some things had to be done and they had to bear the consequences. And the price Dongqing Wudi needed to pay could only come from the Border Control Corps. He was now the executive minister of the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State and still the commander of the Border Control Corps. This part-time job must be given away, but giving up this position did not mean that the Dongqing clan was willing to give up the dominance of the Border Control Corps. With Dongqing Wudi's foundation and prestige in the Border Control Corps, in a short time, even if all the 4 commanders of the Border Control Corps were removed, the new commander could not quickly establish his own team. By the time the new commander established his authority, Dongqing Wudi had already established his own order in the military. The Wang family of Beihai was extremely enthusiastic about the position of the Border Control Corps. If the Dongqing clan made a deal with the Wang family of Beihai, under normal circumstances, it would not be a one-off deal at all. At least for a few years, it would involve many subtle balances and compromises. That was under normal circumstances. But if Dongqing Wudi risked universal condemnation and broke the rules, the price he had to pay might be the control of the entire Border Control Corps, or at least most of it. What he gave up was more than most of the control. There were also nearly 600,000 soldiers who worshipped him like a god. If the morale of the Border Control Corps was unstable, it would become a national affair. And from the bottom of his heart, Dongqing Wudi did not want to experience the guilt and entanglement of giving up nearly 600,000 troops. Give up? How could he? But if he didn't give up, would he watch Li Tianlan be besieged in the final maneuver? If Li Tianlan died in the final maneuver, not to mention what would happen to Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai, the relationship between him and Bai Qingqian would come to an end. At that time, the poor woman who had made Dongqing Wudi feel guilty for many years would definitely take revenge on the Dongqing clan at all costs. The Bai family and the Dongqing clan parted ways, the giant group split, and the family was separated. This was a family affair. How could there be absolute fairness and justice between families and countries? Dongqing Wudi was lost in thought. This was a choice between family and country, and it was also the entanglement between the responsibility of a husband and the vocation of a soldier. If you had known this, why did you do it? Bai Qingzhao suddenly said. Her tone was light, without sarcasm, anger, or any emotion, as if she were saying a fact similar to 1 + 1 = 2. He really didn't mean to mock the Dongqing clan. The Dongqing clan was not the only one who tried to change. That year, when all the plans started, Dongqing Hongguang and Dongqing Wudi were present. His father, Bai Zhanfeng, was present, and so was Bai Qingzhao himself. They were all in the game. It was just that this game of chess had been played for more than 20 years. For the Li family it was just the beginning, but for them, it had already entered the end stage. From the middle stage to the end stage, the final maneuver was the key of the key. But all the people in the game did not expect that Dongqing Wudi, who was extremely determined because of his responsibility, would become so hesitant at this time because of his responsibility. It was not wrong to choose the Li family back then. Dongqing Wudi said calmly, "We chose the Li family because it was the best choice and the only choice. It was the same more than 20 years ago, and it is still the same today more than 20 years later." Your decision? Bai Qingzhao didn't go to Dongqing Wudi to discuss right and wrong, but just asked with a poker face. Dongqing Wudi fell silent again. His expression kept changing. Under the light of the office, it was clear that he was in pain and entanglement. "No matter what decision you make, I will understand you," Bai Qingzhao said softly. Bai Qingzhao said softly. These were words from the bottom of his heart and he could understand. But it is limited to understanding. Understanding did not mean approval. Understanding was rational analysis after putting aside one's standpoint. Acknowledging him was a rather callous choice from his own standpoint. If one did not agree, one would be an enemy. The Bai family made a choice back then. Today they would make the same choice. There was no reason just because of that year. "What do you suggest?" Dongqing Wudi suddenly asked. "Just abandon it," Bai Qingzhao said without hesitation. "It's easy for you to say. Just abandon the 600,000 troops?" Dongqing Wudi looked displeased. "I know it's not easy," Bai Qingzhao said softly, "but are you willing to give up Li Tianlan?" Dongqing Wudi was even more displeased. If he was willing, why should he be entangled now? He put Li Tianlan on the same level as the 600,000 troops, which showed that he cared about Li Tianlan. "Since you are unwilling, then abandon it." Bai Qingzhao stood up, threw a cigarette to Dongqing Wudi and said softly, "Don't forget our original intention. At that time you, me and Uncle Zhou sought change. Our ultimate goal was to get rid of the loose alliance of the giant group. It was destined to be a process of giving up and gaining. Wudi, you have your 600,000 troops, and the Bai family and the Zhou family also have their own concerns and responsibilities. But if we can pick it up, we can put it down. When the change we want appears, we'll just take back what we put down." He patted Dongqing Wudi on the shoulder. "This is your second year. You have at least 8 years. Why can't you afford to wait? If you abandon the Border Control Corps, you will still be the executive minister of the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State." Dongqing Wudi's body shook violently, and he didn't speak for a long time. The moon outside the window was rising. The army headquarters building was dark, and the sky was full of stars. After a long time, Dongqing Wudi picked up his mobile phone. Ning Ziyuan hadn't replied to him yet. He had left the Eastern Theater of Operations. It would take time for many things to work, at least overnight. "Get the car ready," Dongqing Wudi said in a low voice. "Go to the Hidden Dragon Sea. I want to meet the president in person." Bai Qingzhao's body relaxed quietly, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Dongqing Wudi walked out of the office, took out his mobile phone, and dialed the phone number of General Wang Wantian, the former commander of the Blood Battalion of the Border Control Corps and the current commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations. "Marshal." The phone was quickly connected. Wang Wantian's steady voice sounded extremely powerful. "Wantian, prepare according to plan number 2. Inform Huaining. Time is pressing. You have to hurry." Dongqing Wudi rubbed his temples and his tone was a little tired. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. Wang Wantian's deep voice sounded again. "Marshal, have you really decided?" Dongqing Wudi smiled, a little self-deprecating. "Go ahead." He gave the order in a calm tone. Wang Wantian took a deep breath, said yes and then hung up the phone. Dongqing Wudi put down his mobile phone, walked out of the army headquarters building, and looked at the starry sky above. Between family and country. In his decades, someone had told him that when the country was about to fall, how could the family survive? Someone had also told him that the bounden duty of a soldier was to protect the family and defend the country. But no one had ever told him how to choose between family and country. So the choice he made tonight was his own. The country was not broken. The family was about to fall. Chapter 355. There is a chapter called Between Families and Countries before this. It's very important. Don't miss it. If the order of the final maneuver of the 2 academies was adjusted to target Li Tianlan, then another change after the order adjustment made everyone smell the smell of blood. Strictly speaking, this was the only change. The order of the content of the maneuver was disrupted, but it was not too much or too little. It was not considered a change. What Kunlun City changed this time was just a number. In the first round of the final maneuver of the two academies, the predicted casualty rate of the teamwork combat was 55%. Compared with the 30% in the last session, the extra 25% was destined to be a bloody fight to the death. Allowing more than half of the casualty rate was tantamount to Kunlun City telling everyone that they could be ruthless in teamwork combat without worrying about everything. It also foreshadowed Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan to be ruthless to Li Tianlan. The heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, the heir of the Li family, the first person of the young generation. In the maneuver, if they were unlucky, they might become part of the 55% casualty rate. Li Tianlan could clearly feel the gloomy smell of blood and killing intent behind the fluctuation of this index. Because of this, he asked Dongqing Rushi and Du Hanin to abstain and chose to face everyone by himself. Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi could no longer talk about implicating each other. But there was no doubt that if she really accompanied Li Tianlan to the battlefield, Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan would definitely kill her. A daughter of the Dongqing clan who had no position was worth winning over by anyone, but once she took a clear side, she would be an enemy. In the maneuver that seemed to be absolutely fair, there was no need to talk nonsense in the face of the enemy. Li Tianlan didn't think he would lose in the maneuver. But at the critical moment, it was really difficult for him to guarantee that he could take care of the people around him. Whether it was for Dongqing Rushi herself or because of his relationship with the Dongqing clan, Li Tianlan didn't want any accident to happen to Dongqing Rushi. It was late at night when he persuaded Dongqing Rushi, which was the early morning of July 23rd. That afternoon, Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi appeared in the Sky Academy. Before preparing to attend the symposium held by Gu Xingyun, Li Tianlan went to the ward of Li Beidian and others. Li Beidian, Su Chu and Ning Qianqing. The three of them were real brothers in hardship. They lay side by side on the bed looking gloomy. Du Hanin, Yu Qingyan and Yi Huayu stood in the ward helplessly. The atmosphere was so oppressive that it almost froze. When Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi walked in, they just looked at him. The atmosphere became even more oppressive. What happened? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. Ning Qianqing, who was closest to the door, glanced at him and shook his head with a bitter smile. He did not speak. Li Tianlan glanced around and fixed his eyes on Du Hanin. Du Hanin calmly waved a document in her hand. It was information about the contents of the maneuver. The symposium held by Gu Xingyun would officially begin in less than 2 hours. At noon, all the people who were eligible to be invited received this information. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved and he was about to speak. Damn. Li Beidian suddenly said, I'm participating in the team battle in the maneuver. Su Chu and Ning Qianqing raised their eyebrows. Just when they were about to say that they would go regardless of the consequences, Li Tianlan interrupted them with a smile. It's useful for you to go with your current injury. At least you can get rid of a few cannon fodders. Then I'll drag you away and finally lose without knowing why. Is this the result you want? Li Beidian gritted his teeth. He should not have been so seriously injured in the battle with Gu Yulan. If it weren't for Gu Yunxia's sudden sneak attack, he would definitely be the real core combat force standing next to Li Tianlan today. The great void sword was unsheathed. He could not defeat Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingxiao, but at least he could share a lot of pressure for Li Tianlan. No one is allowed to go, Li Tianlan said calmly. He glanced at Du Hanin and was silent for a while. Suddenly he said, You and Rushi will abstain in the afternoon. Dongqing Rushi held Li Tianlan's hand, and there was nothing unusual on her face. Today she was wearing a pair of black shorts, a white t-shirt and a cute bun hairstyle. Standing beside Li Tianlan, she was quiet like a blade of grass. Abstain? Du Hanin looked up in astonishment. Everyone's eyes were focused on Li Tianlan. Abstain. Li Tianlan nodded. Young governor, I'm not afraid of death. Du Hanin bit her lip and said in a determined tone. She joined Sai City 3 years ago in Heaven Capital and had been regarded as a member of Sai City for the past 3 years. During these 3 years, Du Hanin's realm had not made much progress and she barely entered the thunder-shocking realm. But her mutant wind vein was becoming mature. It didn't take time at all for her to be regarded as a capable assassin in Sai City. She had the wind vein, a mutant one at that. In the whole Sai City and even the whole Dark World, Tribulation, who was known as the King of Shadow and had dual wind veins, could be said to be her best teacher. Under the protection of Sai City, she blended herself perfectly into the shadow. In the darkness, she got her long-lost dignity. What about before? After her family was destroyed and before she entered Sai City, she was still sleeping with different men in the Sky Academy, just for a few pitiful credits. Du Hanin was willing to die for Sai City and the young governor of Sai City just for the small but significant changes in the past 3 years. I don't doubt your determination, Li Tianlan said softly, but it's meaningless. The opponent's lineup this time looks really luxurious. We don't have such a lineup, so we have to admit that we can't compete with them. It's not shameful to abstain temporarily. You'll have nothing if you die. You won't play a role here in the future. I alone am enough for the maneuver here. He paused and continued, if you follow me, I'm afraid that I won't be able to take care of you and will be distracted. This was the reason to persuade Dongqing Rushi. It would not be a problem to persuade the people of East Emperor Palace. I was thinking that when you came back, East Emperor Palace would make a killing in the final maneuver, and our brothers would be in the limelight. Now, Ning Qianqing laughed self-deprecatingly and bitterly. Our future is not in the Sky Academy. Li Tianlan laughed. This is just a starting point. The sky of our future is in the south. He looked at Ning Qianqing meaningfully. The south? Everyone was a little surprised. At this time in Zhongzhou State, most people would think that Li Tianlan would develop in the north or in Jiangxia after graduation. Situ Tsangyue, the governor of Sai City, used the national weapon-setting sun to seriously injure Gu Xingyun. Under the anger of the higher-ups, Sai City suffered heavy losses. Liaodong and Longjiang province had now fallen into the hands of Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai respectively. But in Guangdong, Sai City still had the final say. As the young governor of Sai City, it was natural for Li Tianlan to go to Guangdong. Jiangxia was the place where the Li family made a comeback, and the political wealth left by Wu Jingmin was enough to make Li Tianlan go smoothly. These two places were the most suitable for Li Tianlan. Who could imagine that he was going to the south? The south? Li Baiqian's eyes lit up quietly. Where? Tianan. Li Tianlan took a deep look at Li Baidian and then at Ning Qianqing. Tianan was outside the territory of Zhongzhou State, within the sphere of influence of Zhongzhou State, and outside the constraints of rules. It was not until this moment, facing Li Baidian and Ning Qianqing, that Li Tianlan clearly realized what it meant for him to go to Tianan. Many arrangements, intentionally or unintentionally, had been made a long time ago, and it was not until today that they showed their great value. In Tianan, the current commander of the Tianan Freedom Corps, which actually belonged to Zhongzhou State under the banner of the rebel army of Annan State, was Ning Ziyuan. He was Ning Qianqing's father. When East Emperor Palace went to Tianan, Ning Qianqing could invisibly play the role of Li Tianlan's spokesperson in Tianan. In Zhongzhou State, Tianan was located in the southwest. Some things in the special warfare system of Tianan would frequently connect with the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters. Who was the current minister of the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters? It was Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana Sword Master of Mount Shu. He was Li Baiqian's first senior brother. If Ning Qianqing was Li Tianlan's spokesperson in Tianan, Li Baidian was the bridge between Tianan and the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. Between Tianan and Zhongzhou State, the biggest force was the Blood Battalion of the Border Control Corps of Zhongzhou State. Wang Wantian, the commander of the Blood Battalion, was transferred to the Eastern Theater of Operations as the commander. But now, the core of the Dongqing clan was still the commander of the Blood Battalion. Thunder God. Dongqing Rushi's godfather. He was also the uncle who took Li Tianlan to the desert from the border. In a trance, there seemed to be a golden path in front of him. Until now, Li Tianlan vaguely had a feeling of sudden enlightenment. Ning Qianqing, Li Baidian, Dongqing Rushi, Thunder God, Ning Ziyuan, they were like chess pieces scattered on a misty chessboard. All of them were vague and had no connection with each other. But now, with the placement of Li Tianlan, the biggest chess piece, the fog dissipated and everything became clear. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. He saw the chessboard of Tianan with all the pieces placed. He also saw in Tianan his way to get rid of the fate of being a chess piece and become a chess player. That was where the real beginning began. It's Tianan. Li Tianlan muttered to himself. Tianan? An old voice rang out at the door of the ward. Zhuang Huayang, the principal of the Sky Academy, came in accompanied by Qin Ku, the deputy director of the teaching office. He looked at Li Tianlan, who looked calm, with undisguised complexity and realization in his eyes. He was also a player in the game. So, like others, he saw Li Tianlan's future with a gloomy fog. But it was not until he heard Li Tianlan mention the word Tianan, that he suddenly realized what a wonderful move the hand that had pushed Li Tianlan behind the scenes had made in Tianan. Tianan. For Zhuang Huayang it was like a thunder. Everything seemed so obvious. But Ning Ziyuan went to Tianan because the Wang family of Beihai was siding with the same faction and fighting against the different faction. Thunder God of the Blood Battalion was the prelude to Dongqing Wudi's trade with the Border Control Corps after Wang Wantian left. Mount Shu became the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters, which was expected by the public and supported by the Prince Group. All the forces acted unintentionally, but in the end, they operated a situation that was like heaven for Li Tianlan. Zhuang Huayang did not believe that it was all unintentional. He would rather believe that there was a hand behind all this that had reached into the inside of the major groups and was carefully and quietly controlling the situation. This was truly unfathomable. He just did not know who this hand, who could be called a national master, was. Was it Li Honghe? Was it the Dongqing clan? Or Qin Weibai? No matter who it was too late when the people in the game realized it. The Li family, a big dragon that had been trapped on the chessboard for more than 20 years, had been completely revived in silence. Zhuang Huayang sighed and shook his head, thinking of the call with the chief last night. Before that, he understood the chief's approach, but today when he heard the words Tianan, he realized that he had to remind the chief's means. Chapter 356. Li Tianlan glanced at Zhuang Huayang. His eyes were calm, so calm that there was some politeness in them. "It's Tianan," he said softly. Zhuang Huayang was speechless for a while. It was too late to say anything now. The Special Warfare Headquarters was established, Ning Ziyuan was transferred, and the Blood Legion completed the handover. Under such circumstances, Li Tianlan's trip to Tianan was really like turning into a dragon when encountering a storm. Zhuang Huayang was convinced, and he even had some awe for the person behind the scenes. To gather the general trend of Zhongzhou State in Tianan, such a technique was truly grand and exquisite to the extreme. When the storm in Zhongzhou State was unstable, he calmly placed a chess piece in Tianan. It seemed a little unreasonable, but he suddenly revitalized the whole chessboard. What convinced Zhuang Huayang the most was that there was no sign of any deliberate action at all. Naturally, several major forces operated at the same time, and they had inadvertently created such a situation that no one had expected. After the Yuzhou conference, the Li family made a comeback. Everyone's eyes were focused on the northeast and southeast. Some people were guarding against the Li family and some were counting their gains. The situation in Tianan was obvious, but because everything seemed so natural, no one had realized it yet. The easiest to overlook was often the most obvious. For example, the sunlight during the day. For example, the starry night sky. Zhuang Huayang didn't know how much preparation the person behind the scenes had made for such a wonderful technique. But if this person hadn't been clear about the situation in Zhongzhou State, there would have been no such effect as today's thunder in silence. When did all of this start? Zhuang Huayang pondered silently. The general trend of Tianan and the changes of several sensitive positions were the result of the internal operations of the Wang family of Beihai, the Prince Group and the Giant Group. The Yuzhou Conference, Lin, and the Northeast had indeed attracted everyone's attention. Thus, for the time being, no one had noticed Tianan. This didn't seem hard to understand, but it was also hard to understand. After all, Li Tianlan was here. He was a rare martial arts genius in Zhongzhou State for decades. Li Tianlan could be said to be the most central figure in all these changes. How could he be ignored? To anyone ignoring such a martial arts genius, ignore? Zhuang Huayang's brain suddenly became a little sluggish. He looked at Li Tianlan's calm face. While thinking, Zhuang Huayang's back was covered in cold sweat. Ignore Li Tianlan? No one would be so stupid. Even if there were in the past, there wouldn't be a second time after their return. Zhuang Huayang had never ignored Li Tianlan. He was a martial arts prodigy, but it was not until this moment that he suddenly realized that Li Tianlan was only a martial arts genius in his mind. That was the only impression he had. Li Tianlan had done a lot, but he seemed to have done nothing. With his strength and status, there was nothing he could do now. In the final battle of Heaven Capital, he was a pawn of Zhongzhou State. In the process of the Li family returning to the peak, he was like a pawn of the Li family. He was so pure, so clear-headed, and had always been silently improving his strength. He really didn't consider anything, or at least he didn't show it. Why did the Li family suddenly collapse back then? Did the Wang family of Beihai do something secretly? What resources did Kunlun City use in the plan back then? Would these resources be clues? What was the truth behind Li Guangtu's treason? From the beginning to the end, Li Tianlan didn't even care about this series of questions that he had to consider in his position. He knew nothing about the past and didn't explore it. Instead, he focused purely on improving his strength, waiting for the opportunity to take the first step. He was too obvious. So much so that it even became his label in people's eyes. Zhuang Huayang finally knew why the powerful Wang family of Beihai and the delicate Kunlun city ignored Tiannan. Their eyes were indeed on the northeast and Jiangxia, but also on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan showed that he just wanted to improve his strength. And what they paid attention to was Li Tianlan himself. So that in the end Tiannan such a huge omission was formed. Zhuang Huayang's heart was a little cold. He didn't know whether Li Tianlan did all this intentionally or unintentionally. If the answer was intentional, he was willing to use himself as a chess piece and use the purest way to attract everyone's attention. How scheming was he to be so dormant? The corners of Zhuang Huayang's mouth kept trembling. At this moment he wanted to say a lot, but he didn't know why he couldn't say anything. It's almost time. Li Tianlan looked down at his watch. It was 2:20 in the afternoon. Gu Xingyun's symposium was held at 3 o'clock in the conference room of the Sky Academy, about 15 minutes away from here. He nodded to Zhuang Huayang, then looked at Dongqing Rushi and Du Hanin and said calmly, "Let's go." Tianlan. Zhuang Huayang took a deep breath and suddenly shouted. Li Tianlan turned to look at him. "What's your plan?" When he asked this, Zhuang Huayang's tone was a little bitter. The final maneuver of the two academies was a grand event of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. Kunlun City had the greatest dominance. But as the current ruling group of Zhongzhou State, if the academics insisted on standing as an ally, even if it couldn't change the order of the maneuver, it could at least fight for more living space for Li Tianlan and let him see the sincerity of the academics. But the chief didn't do so. Instead, he chose silence and acquiescence. Li Tianlan was still an ally of the academics. But this subtle change began after Li Tianlan established a closer relationship with the giant group. The academics hoped that Li Tianlan had something to do with the giant group, but they didn't want their relationship to be too close. Li Tianlan, who largely depended on the academics to survive, was far more in line with the interests of the academics than Li Tianlan, who was at ease in the two groups. But Zhou Yuanshan's trip to Jiangzhou was tantamount to the giant group clearly announcing to the outside world that they would create their core team with Li Tianlan as the core for the next few decades. The academics could only take this opportunity to pressure Li Tianlan and the giant group. In such a state, Li Tianlan was an ally of the academics, but he was more like a pawn used by the academics to ask for benefits from the giant group. The most important thing was that Li Tianlan was willing to be a pawn of the Li family, but he might not be willing to be a pawn of the academics. Now the situation in Tiannan was gradually clear, and Li Tianlan's future was predictable. He was the strongest ally in the future, but in the next final maneuver he would face an extremely embarrassing situation. Zhuang Huayang really wanted to know what Li Tianlan's plan was. Rushi and Hanin will abstain. Li Tianlan said calmly, "I will participate in the final maneuver myself and participate in their so-called team battle." "By yourself?" Zhuang Huayang's face changed dramatically. "I won't lose," Li Tianlan said blandly. Zhuang Huayang smiled bitterly again. The academics had made their own moves. The key was whether Dongqing Wudi was willing to break the rules for Li Tianlan. If Dongqing Rushi did not abstain, Dongqing Wudi was undoubtedly more likely to take action for his daughter. But if Dongqing Rushi abstained, on one side was the responsibility of the Border Control Corps, and on the other side was the weight of Li Tianlan. How would Dongqing Wudi choose? If he chose to give up, this maneuver would be a dead end for Li Tianlan. If he lost, Li Tianlan would die. If he won, Li Tianlan would still die. Li Tianlan could win with such a lineup. Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai would definitely kill this threat at all costs. This might be an opportunity for the academics? But if the giant group gave up, would the big shots of the academics really offend the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City for Li Tianlan? Who was willing to bear that kind of pressure? Zhuang Huayang had a splitting headache. He took a deep breath, patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder and said in a deep voice, "I'll call the leading cadre right away." Li Tianlan smiled, turned and walked out of the ward. The conference room of the Sky Academy was very large. The environment was pale white, simple and spacious. When Li Tianlan walked into the conference room with Dongqing Rushi and Du Hanin 15 minutes in advance, Gu Xingyun was already sitting in the main seat of the conference room. Gu Qianxuan, who used to serve as a real marshal in Zhongzhou State and now became a nominal title with the disbandment of the Snowdance Corps, stood quietly beside Gu Xingyun with an indifferent expression. The fresh sunshine after the rain gently sprinkled into the main seat of the conference room. The two invincible realm experts of Zhongzhou State stood and bathed in the sunshine, as if they were wearing a layer of golden clothes. There were already many figures in the conference room. Gu Xingyun's symposium was held by the top young people in the two academies. To be exact, they were high-level people who had a clear team and served as the core figures in their respective teams, or the individual immortals with great personal strength. Li Tianlan had read the information. This time there were about 30 forces in the two academies, and the total number of people was about 750. Under normal circumstances, this should be the total number of people in the team cooperation maneuver. There were lunatics who participated in the team maneuver to save their lives, but there were not many in previous years. In the final maneuver, where the casualty rate was at least 30%, an individual facing a team was tantamount to courting death, or it was tantamount to giving credits to others. According to the rules of the two academies, the final maneuver of the two academies was important, but credits were more important. Therefore, the maneuver seemed to be a contest of force, but the tricks in it also tested a person's mind. Every student would consider how to make use of their strengths to make up for their weaknesses and strive for the most credits to improve their ranking. As soon as Li Tianlan and the other two walked into the conference room, almost everyone's eyes were focused on them. Most people's eyes were a little strange. Wang Xingxiao and Song Xiai sat in the middle. Seeing Li Tianlan come in, Wang Xingxiao waved his hand with a smile as a greeting, looking very friendly. Gu Hanshan, the young master of Kunlun City, and Gu Yulan, the last disciple of Gu Qianchuan, sat together. They were almost next to Wang Xingxiao and Song Xiai. Gu Yulan, whose face was still a little pale, was still wearing a mask. She snuggled up to Gu Hanshan like a little bird. Jiang Shangyu sat on the other side of Gu Hanshan. Before Li Tianlan came in, several super experts of the young generation of Zhongzhou State had been whispering together. What they said did not matter at all. What mattered was that the signal they gave was clear enough, and that was enough. Li Tianlan was expressionless. He picked a chair at random and sat down, quietly waiting for the meeting to begin. Time passed slowly. At 3 o'clock sharp, the bell rang in the office. Gu Xingyun, who had been sitting in the main seat with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. He glanced around, and a smile bloomed on his elegant face. Everyone is here. Gu Xingyun said, "Let's have a meeting." Li Tianlan froze and subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Everyone is here? Sitting next to him, Du Hanyin and Dongqing Rushi were celebrities of the two academies respectively. Before the meeting began, they had introduced the main figures present to Li Tianlan. The conference room was large and there were many people sitting, but it was far from complete. There were about 30 forces of the two academies that had not been disbanded after 3 years. But Du Hanyin and Dongqing Rushi introduced too few. 5 from the Sky Academy. 7 from the Deep Sea Academy. This also included East Emperor Palace, 3000 World, Phantom Palace, and Jilei Mountain. That was to say, half of the young forces of the two academies were not present at this time. But Gu Xingyun said that everyone was here. Li Tianlan did not think that Gu Xingyun would make mistakes in this kind of thing. Then it could only prove one thing. In this team maneuver, more than half of the forces in the two academies chose to abstain for various reasons. Abstaining was allowed in the maneuver of the two academies. But abstaining was not without a price. Some credits would be deducted. So abstaining was not so easy to determine. But even so, more than half of the forces chose to abstain. What did this mean? Li Tianlan observed everyone in the conference room calmly. Of the 12 forces present at this time, in addition to East Emperor Palace, Phantom Palace, 3000 World, and Jilei Mountain, there were 8 other forces. There was no doubt that these were the forces led by Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan. The rules set by Kunlun City seemed to be ordinary except for increasing the casualty rate. But in fact, the team maneuver, which used to be placed in the middle or at the end, had become the simplest and most brutal encirclement and suppression with the adjustment of the order. Li Tianlan was the target of everyone's encirclement and suppression. Could even be said that he was the only target. Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai made it clear that they wanted to give Li Tianlan a little chance. Li Tianlan looked at Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan. Gu Xingyun did not look at him. But Gu Qianchuan's eyes were always on Li Tianlan. His eyes were ferocious and vicious, with awe-inspiring killing intent. Seeing Li Tianlan's gaze, Gu Qianchuan raised the corner of his mouth and showed a disdainful sneer. Li Tianlan lowered his head again and remained calm. Gu Xingyun smiled again. His injury was indeed very serious and his breath was short and heavy. Even if he tried to hide it, he could not hide it perfectly. Li Tianlan glanced at him and lowered his head again. Some teams finally applied to give up this team maneuver for various reasons. I personally agreed with their abstention. So the team combat on the first day of the maneuver is probably everyone here in your team. Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and continued, this year's team maneuver is special. After careful consideration, Kunlun City decided to increase the casualty rate of this maneuver. But correspondingly, the credits obtained will also increase accordingly. The casualty rate will increase by 20%, and the credits will be increased by 50% according to the previous standard. Such a result is destined to make the competition between you very fierce. I'll ask you again formally. Is there anyone here who wants to withdraw from the maneuver? There was silence. In the silence, a clear voice sounded. I abstain. What? There was an uproar. Everyone turned to look at Dongqing Rushi, their eyes full of incredible emotions. Dongqing Rushi, Li Tianlan's fiancé, abstained. Did Li Tianlan fall out with the giant group? Gu Xingyun was also stunned, and he didn't even hide the surprise in his eyes. Dongqing Rushi's withdrawal meant that the giant group was less likely to intervene in this maneuver. He had no reason not to be surprised. Dongqing, are you sure? Gu Xingyun asked, trying to make his voice soft. Dongqing Rushi glanced at Gu Xingyun, nodded, stood up and walked out directly. It seemed that she came here to announce the news. I abstain. Du Hanin also stood up and followed Dongqing Rushi out of the conference room. Everyone's brains were buzzing, and they couldn't fully understand what was going on for a while. Diagonally across from Li Tianlan, Wang Xingxiao narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Song Ci. Song Ci didn't look at Wang Xingxiao, just lowered her head. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were still gentle, but the light gradually became stern. In an absolute disadvantage, Li Tianlan didn't want to implicate his woman, so he sent Dongqing Rushi out of the maneuver. Wang Xingxiao had an absolute advantage. Why would he let his woman take the risk? He looked at Song Ci without blinking. Thus, while everyone was still in a state of shock, another unexpected voice rang out. I abstain. Song Ci gritted her teeth and her voice was a little helpless. She glared at Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao smiled and touched Song Ci's hair. This was a man's war. Li Tianlan didn't want his woman to take the risk. As the heir of the Wang family of Beihai, he naturally had no reason to lose to Li Tianlan in this kind of courage. Everyone's eyes began to shift and finally fell on Gu Hanshan. This team maneuver was destined to be a life-and-death fight. Both Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao sent their women out of the maneuver to give them safety. What about Gu Hanshan? The muscles on Gu Hanshan's face twitched fiercely. He was expressionless and said nothing. Gu Yulan meant Gu Hanshan, so she also said nothing. In the silence, Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao's eyes seemed to meet for a moment, intentionally or unintentionally. Both of them saw a trace of mockery in each other's eyes. Anyone else wants to quit? Gu Xingyun asked. No one spoke. This time everyone chose to stay. Gu Xingyun looked at Gu Hanshan, and an obscure light flashed in his eyes. His tone was still calm. Very well, since you accept the maneuver, I will introduce the rules. I will tell you the specific tasks of the maneuver the day before the maneuver. Everyone, although your competition is very fierce, I still hope that if possible, you will try to be merciful to your opponents because they are not enemies. This is just a maneuver. From his standpoint, this was what he had to say for the sake of the situation. The sake of the situation was nonsense. It also included the so-called rules that Gu Xingyun explained. In fact, today Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingxiao sat together, which was the most important practical content. The actual content didn't need to be said. It was already here. This was to put pressure on Li Tianlan, and it was also to strengthen the confidence of other young forces that followed the Wang family of Beihai in Kunlun City. This was the real meaning. Li Tianlan quietly listened to Gu Xingyun's nonsense. He felt a little bored. The nonsense was unexpectedly long. The meeting started at 3 o'clock, and Gu Xingyun talked until 4:30. No one had a problem with such maneuver rules. So Gu Xingyun announced the end of the meeting. The young elites who participated in the meeting left one after another. Before leaving, everyone glanced at Li Tianlan with meaningful eyes. Li Tianlan sat in his seat alone. He was truly a loner. He was surrounded by bone-chilling hostility from all directions. He suddenly smiled and glanced at Gu Xingyun again. Then he got up and was about to leave. Stop. A voice suddenly sounded behind him, calm and confident, almost like an order. Li Tianlan calmly turned around. What's the matter? He asked, narrowing his eyes. Gu Hanshan, who had never communicated with Li Tianlan, walked to Li Tianlan. He looked at Li Tianlan's eyes carefully. The two looked at each other. What do you think is more important, survival or glory? Gu Hanshan suddenly said, if it were you, which one do you value most? No one could think that Gu Hanshan's first sentence was to ask such a profound and simple question. Li Tianlan remained calm. He could feel that the eyes of the two invincible realm experts of Kunlun City were focused on him at this time. He suddenly smiled and said calmly, the most important thing is the enemy. I think the master and the servant are the most important. There was a faint but extremely dangerous smile on Gu Hanshan's face. His face was ordinary, but at this time, it had an indescribable strength. I'm willing to give you a chance. You be my dog and I can give you the right to survive and the opportunity to gnaw on bones. How about that? Gu Hanshan's tone was very generous and generous. Don't be ungrateful. He whispered unhurriedly, if you want to live, this is your last chance. If you don't want the face I'm giving you, I promise you will regret it. Only those who knew the past of the Li family in Kunlun City understood what Gu Hanshan meant. The Gu family had a long history. But more than 20 years ago, there was no special warfare group in Zhongzhou State. At that time there were only 5 groups in Zhongzhou State. At that time, the Gu family was regarded by many as a running dog at the feet of the Li family, or a running dog of the Southeast group, which could not be shown in public. Gu Hanshan was undoubtedly proud. He didn't want to admit the dark history of the Gu family, but he wanted the heir of the Li family to crawl at his feet and be his dog. Wang Xingxiao heard this sentence. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He wanted to say something, but he forced himself to hold back. Let Li Tianlan be a dog? Perhaps in the whole dark world, only Gu Hanshan had this courage. Perhaps even Gu Xingyun didn't have this idea. Wang Xingxiao knew very well that even his father, Wang Tianzong, had tried to rope in Li Tianlan. As long as Li Tianlan agreed to join the Wang family of Beihai in the future, Li Tianlan's weight in the territory of the Wang family of Beihai was no less than that of him, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. This was not only sincerity, but also respect for Li Tianlan's potential. But now Gu Hanshan asked Li Tianlan to be his dog. Such courage was really cute. Li Tianlan's expression did not change. He looked at Gu Hanshan and directly said what Wang Xingxiao wanted to say. Are you an idiot? He looked at Gu Hanshan and asked very seriously. What did you say? Gu Hanshan's face was cold. I said you're an idiot. Li Tianlan chuckled. Is the young master of Kunlun City that great? Do you really think you're a big shot? You're courting death by offending me like this. Gu Hanshan laughed gloomily and his eyes were cold. I really don't think you're a big shot. Li Tianlan said blandly, in a dangerous situation I will keep my woman away from danger, and Wang Xingxiao will also keep his woman away from danger. What about you? He looked at Gu Yulan and said mockingly, in a dangerous situation in your eyes, your woman may just be a character who can create traps for the enemy. She hasn't recovered yet, right? Based on this alone, you're far inferior to me and Wang Xingxiao. When we climb the martial arts, we cultivate the sword energy and condense the sword intent. We're born as human beings with no breadth of mind and bearing. So what if you have 10 heavenly king hearts? You're just a useless person. Gu Hanshan's face did not change at all, but his tone became colder. Very good, very good. Li Tianlan smiled. What he said was actually the truth. When he entered the secular world 3 years ago, he valued Gu Hanshan, who had the heavenly king heart, because the other party's realm was much higher than his. But in terms of martial arts, he really didn't think much of the heir of Kunlun City. The Gu family used to be a low-key dog. After overthrowing the Li family, it became the war god clan of Zhongzhou State. Its rise and fall of honor and disgrace were straight up and down. In terms of foundation, it was a real upstart. Gu Hanshan's status was very high, but he didn't want to forget the shame of being a dog of the Li family, at least not far enough for him to forget. In such a state, he had the heavenly king heart, but there must be something wrong with his state of mind. In Li Tianlan's eyes, if he had to count his future opponents among the young generation of Zhongzhou State, even Jiang Shangyu ranked ahead of Gu Hanshan, not to mention Wang Xingxiao. It's not a good thing for young people to be arrogant. Gu Xingyun's voice suddenly sounded. He walked over slowly and looked at Li Tianlan with a faint smile. Tianlan, no one will doubt your potential. But potential is not equal to combat capability. I've seen many geniuses with amazing potential but died young. Li Tianlan said calmly, Your Highness is experienced and knowledgeable. No wonder you can cultivate such an excellent air. I admire you. Gu Xingyun was not angry at all. His smile became more elegant and warm. Hans Han is young and has many shortcomings, but it doesn't matter. But he's right about one thing. It's really important to know how to adapt to circumstances and appreciate favors. In this respect, you're not good enough. Do I have to be a dog for him if I do well? Li Tianlan laughed. He suddenly thought of something. I heard that a strong man once killed an invincible realm expert of Kunlun City for a dog? I don't know if it's true. Gu Xingyun's smile slowly faded. He looked at Li Tianlan and said expressionlessly, Tianlan, are you humiliating Kunlun City? I don't dare. Li Tianlan laughed. I just asked casually. I don't need you to remind me of anything in a strange way. Gu Xingyun said indifferently, the Gu family did live under someone else's roof, but it was just a necessary forbearance. The final winner was us. As for the Li family, no matter how glorious it was destroyed. He took a step closer to Li Tianlan and chuckled, but his voice was extremely cold. I can tell you clearly. As long as I'm alive, the Li family can't rise again. You don't want to be a dog? Very well, then be a nonentity for a lifetime. He paused, his voice getting lower and lower, and he chuckled. How is the old dog Li Honghe now? If Situ Tsangyue hadn't stopped me, your grandfather would have died long ago. Ah, but it doesn't matter. Last time I let him fall from the invincible realm, which is equivalent to knocking out his dog teeth. When I recover, I'll go to Lin and again and break his dog legs. It's not difficult to kill him. Li Tianlan looked at Gu Xingyun quietly. There was no anger, no panic. There was only pure emotion in his eyes. I won't let it go. He suddenly laughed. In front of Gu Xingyun, he bent down and took off his shoes and socks. Chapter 357. Many people knew that Gu Xingyun had a mansion beyond many people's imagination on Winter Mountain, called the Purple Gold Pavilion, which was jokingly called the Huading branch of Kunlun City. There was no branch in Kunlun City. The name didn't sound official at all. In fact, it was the highest power center of the Special Warfare Agency of Zhongzhou State. The Special Warfare Headquarters in various regions of Zhongzhou State, the Special Operations Bureaus in various provinces, and the various secret service agencies that had no clear scope of responsibility but always played their role were all directly under Kunlun City. Therefore, Kunlun City didn't need the so-called branch. If there was a branch, it would be the Huading Special Operations Bureau. However, it was also well known that Gu Xingyun preferred the Purple Gold Pavilion. The Purple Gold Pavilion was located on the mountainside of Winter Mountain, covering an area of nearly 300 acres. There were only a few dozen villas built by famous masters scattered on the edge, surrounding the 6-story Purple Gold Pavilion in the center. In terms of feng shui, it was a standard blessed land for hiding wind, water, and gathering qi. The layers were clear and natural. Coupled with the artificial layout, it seemed that this place could enjoy the luck of Winter Mountain. Gu Xingyun believed in fate, so every time he came to Huading, he would live in the Purple Gold Pavilion. Even when he held meetings and issued orders to the Southeast Special Warfare Agency, if he was in Huading, he would also set the meeting place here. This place was different from the turbulent Yuzhou and the snowy Kunlun. Standing here and looking at Huading, there was only an infinite expanse. Therefore, Gu Xingyun had always regarded the Purple Gold Pavilion as his own blessed land. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening when Gu Xingyun returned to the Purple Gold Pavilion from the Sky Academy. The Sky Academy held a banquet that was neither serious nor relaxing. After the banquet ended, Gu Xingyun went straight back to the Purple Gold Pavilion. Li Qingqing was sitting in the hall playing chess with herself. The soft crystal lamp in the hall was on. Under the light, the girl staring at the chessboard attentively was picturesque. Her beauty was like a spring rain. She wasn't violent or abrupt. She was natural, elegant, and gentle. She was usually imprinted in the depths of a person's soul without making a sound. Seeing Gu Xingyun coming in, Li Qingqing raised her head and subconsciously stood up and called, "Dad. Make 2 cups of tea." Gu Xingyun ordered calmly and casually sat on the sofa. Li Qingqing nodded meekly and turned to leave. Gu Qianchuan sat opposite to Gu Xingyun. He looked down at Li Qingqing's self-entertaining chess game and said with a smile, "Qingqing is very smart. In the next few years when you recuperate, carve it carefully. After a few years, it may not be worse than today's Song Ci. It should be promising in the future." Gu Xingyun was also looking at the chess game in front of him, but his mind was completely elsewhere. Kunlun City did not have the almost extravagant and endless resources of the Wang family of Beihai, so everyone in Kunlun City was working hard to enhance their strength. Moreover, Li Qingqing was not as favored as Wang Yuetong in the Wang family of Beihai, so her martial arts practice was very hard. Now, at the age of 20, she had entered the stabilization period of the fire-flaming realm with a solid foundation. With her talent, although she did not have the wind and thunder veins and the heavenly king heart, she still had a chance to enter the thunder-shocking realm within 3 or 4 years if she cultivated diligently. A master of the thunder-shocking realm at the age of 24 or 25, and a young and stunning woman at that, if not unparalleled, was at least rare. We'll see. Gu Xingyun thought for a while and said indifferently, "It's a pity to waste such a talent." Gu Qianchuan insisted intentionally or unintentionally, not stingy with his evaluation of Li Qingqing. Gu Xingyun lowered his head and his eyes were a little complicated. Seeing such an excellent daughter, there was no relief in his eyes, only complexity. This was the daughter he and Li Shi gave birth to. Gu Xingyun was convinced that this was his biological daughter. But he did not like her at all. Every time he saw the mother and daughter, Gu Xingyun would always think of some old things that he did not want to remember at all. "You don't like her?" Gu Qianchuan asked a nonsense question. Gu Xingyun glanced at him and did not speak. Gu Qianchuan smiled and whispered, "If you really don't like her, it's better to leave her in Huiding Purple Gold Pavilion. It's okay to give her to Qingqing as a dowry." "What do you mean?" Gu Xingyun reached out to tidy up the chessboard. His tone was a little colder, but it was not aimed at Gu Qianchuan. Gu Qianchuan was also tidying up the chessboard. He clearly held the white chess piece, but he violated the rules by putting a piece on the chessboard first. He said flatly, "Whatever you want to mean, it means what it means. There was Li Shi in those years. Why can't there be Qingqing today? Our Phoenix Pavilion is prepared for Qingqing, isn't it? What are you hesitating for?" He chuckled, playing with the chess piece in his hand and continued, "History will repeat and the past will be reincarnated. Throughout history, there are many examples of people losing their country because of women. Who can tell whether it is because of the sword or because of women that our Kunlun City can have today?" Snap. Gu Xingyun crushed several chess pieces in his hand without expression. His face was cold. Gu Qianchuan smiled. His relationship with Gu Xingyun had not been harmonious. Naturally, he did not care about Gu Xingyun's feelings. Moreover, Gu Xingyun was seriously injured, so he was not afraid that Gu Xingyun would suddenly attack him. The chess pieces slipped from Gu Xingyun's hand. Gu Qianchuan said flatly, "Just take it that you let me have a few glances." Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and slowly placed a chess piece. He said indifferently, "What's the use of Qingqing staying in Huiding? Li Tianlan? Li Tianlan can't survive this maneuver." Gu Qianchuan shook his head. "We don't have to waste resources on him. He is really amazing. Under normal circumstances, Qingqing is the most suitable for him. But now the general trend has been formed, and he is just an ant that will be crushed by the general trend. If Qingqing really wants to get close to him, I won't let her stay in Huiding, but go to Jiangxia or Guangdong." He raised his head, looked at Gu Xingyun who was thoughtful and said with a smile, "Huiding means a lot to the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai." Gu Xingyun raised his eyelids. "Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao." The hall suddenly quieted down. The silence was a little depressing. Gu Xingyun seemed to be hesitating and thinking. After a long time he placed a chess piece and slowly said, "It's not the right time. Let's wait for a few years." Gu Qianchuan slightly raised his eyebrows and did not understand Gu Xingyun's meaning for a while. He thought for a while, then his face changed and he slowly said, "You don't think Wang Tianzong and Wang Xingxiao are good?" A few years was a delicate period which suddenly made him think of a lot. Before Gu Xingyun spoke, Gu Qianchuan had said quickly, "Is it because of Wang Qinglei? The internal problems of the Wang family of Beihai have been exposed more and more in recent years, mostly because of Wang Qinglei. Wang Qinglei does have a chance in the next session. Even if the Southeast group knows something, it is hard to get off. It can only push Wang Qinglei. Even Wang Tianzong does not dare to make fun of the foundation of the Southeast group, but..." He hesitated and finally said, "But even if Wang Qinglei is in that position, will Wang Tianzong lose? Who knows?" Gu Xingyun said indifferently, "At present, the Wang family of Beihai has only exposed some problems, but it has not formed the sharpest opposition. There are just signs of things. Who can see it clearly? 3 years later, everything will probably become clear." Gu Qianchuan was silent. The Wang family of Beihai seemed to be still powerful in recent years, but some internal contradictions accumulated were showing more and more obvious signs of losing control. The biggest reason was naturally Wang Qinglei. Wang Qinglei was now one of the members of the decision-making committee of Zhongzhou State and the top leader of Wuxia Province. In the early years he was the governor of Wuxia Province. After it was determined that he would serve as the top leader and enter the decision-making committee, some contradictions gradually began to surface. But no one knew whether Wang Tianzong was too confident, or the Southeast group trusted Wang Tianzong too much, or their own resources were a little tight. When these signs appeared, the Southeast group did not take it seriously and continued to push Wang Qinglei into the decision-making committee. In the general election 3 years later, it was almost a certainty that Wang Qinglei would take a step forward. He was young and could really attack or retreat. If he made up his mind to be well prepared, even if he could not take a step forward, it was not a big problem for him to enter the center from Wuxia. At that time, the two giants of the Southeast group who had a close relationship with Wang Tianzong would step down. If Wang Qinglei went further, he would become the new flag of the Southeast group. And he would be a very high-ranking flag figure. Even if the Southeast group was not optimistic about Wang Qinglei, he could not be replaced in that position. Even if they had to bite the bullet for the foundation of the group, they could only choose to support Wang Qinglei. At that time, the real game between the powerful Wang Tianzong and the powerful Wang Qinglei would begin. One controlled Beihai province and the other controlled Southeast group. That was a game of power and force. Only at that time, the final result of the Wang family of Beihai could be seen. Gu Xingyun did not allow Li Qingqing to get close to Wang Xingxiao now, not because he was not optimistic about Wang Tianzong and his son, but because he did not know what Wang Tianzong would do in the past 3 years. It was not a good thing to get involved when everything was confusing. The internal problem of the Wang family of Beihai is one aspect. Gu Xingyun said, "On the other hand, I am injured and Qingqing must be by my side. You leave her alone in Huading? You are really bold. If Qingqing is out of control, aren't you afraid that the woman will go crazy and kill you?" Gu Qianchuan's face changed and he smiled bitterly without concealing it. Gu Qianchuan smiled bitterly. On the top of Winter Mountain, under the starry sky, Li Tianlan, who had been sitting here watching the scenery for a long time, also hung up the phone in his hand. "I can be sure." Li Tianlan whispered, "The motorcade that just went in is Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan. Have you really decided?" Lin Yuxian sat next to Li Tianlan. Even though he knew Li Tianlan's purpose, he still felt a little strange. "It's not a decision." Li Tianlan smiled and said, "I told Gu Xingyun that I would not let go of what happened last time. I don't know whether he listened to me or not." Lin Yuxian's mouth twitched and he said with difficulty, "I guess he would never expect that you would be here now." "I didn't expect it myself." Li Tianlan laughed and whispered, "Since I came back, many people have asked me how strong I am now. It's hard for me to answer this question." Li Tianlan chuckled and said, "Because I don't know myself. Tonight is an opportunity to see how strong I am. I might as well try." He pointed to the foot of the mountain. The purple gold pavilion at the foot of the mountain was dimly lit. "I'll go and have a look," he said. Lin Yuxian did not speak or stop him. Li Tianlan slowly went down the mountain alone. He was dressed in white and stepped on the ground barefooted. Behind him was the starry view of the entire Winter Mountain. In the night, the man in white moved straight ahead. In Lin Yuxian's sight, Li Tianlan's figure became more and more illusory, but his footsteps became more and more powerful. The top of Winter Mountain was full of starry sky. Lin Yuxian watched quietly, and his eyes gradually became dignified. Under the starry sky on the top of the mountain, Li Tianlan's figure became completely illusory in his sight. His whole person seemed to be completely integrated into the starry sky, as if he had completely disappeared, but also as if he was everywhere. Between reality and illusory, only his footsteps were still firm and steady. Chapter 358. The more important a thing is, the more you can't make a decision in a hurry. It's not a bad thing to be steady and slow down. Gu Xingyun played with the chess piece in his hand and said thoughtfully. He was not a talkative person, especially a person who did not like to preach. In the eyes of Zhongzhou State people, Gu Xingyun had always been an elegant and wise character. He was silent most of the time, but as long as he spoke, others often had no room to refute. Such silence was undoubtedly more powerful and more awe-inspiring than the so-called torrent of words. But it seemed that this injury had changed Gu Xingyun's mind. Recently he had been with Gu Qianchuan. When they chatted, Gu Xingyun talked more and more. Gu Qianchuan knew what this meant. He also knew that Gu Xingyun did not like him, but he knew that Gu Xingyun could only trust himself now. He liked Li Shi. But he did not dare to trust Li Shi. In the entire Kunlun city, he was the only one with great strength and the same position as him in the general direction. Gu Xingyun did not want to see Kunlun city decline. Gu Qianchuan did not want to either. This was the bottom line. All contradictions were insignificant in the face of the bottom line. Therefore, Gu Xingyun talked so much in the past few days, which was equivalent to teaching him how to take charge of Kunlun city in a very gentle way. Gu Qianchuan did not dislike this. For the sensitivity of power, Gu Xingyun was indeed much better than him. He nodded and waited for Gu Xingyun to go on. The internal crisis of the Wang family of Beihai is great, and it is an opportunity for everyone. At present, the major groups in Zhongzhou state seem to be quiet, but they must have made preparations in secret. Kunlun city is not suitable to move, but it is not suitable to stay still. For us, the Li family is the fat meat in our mouth. After the final maneuver is over and Li Tianlan dies, I must rest and recuperate. During this period of recuperation, it is a good opportunity for Kunlun city. Gu Xingyun slowly put down a chess piece on the chessboard. His eyes flickered under the light, with the brilliance of countless conspiracies and thoughts. What should I do? Gu Qianchuan asked for advice seriously. Li Qingqing came over with 2 cups of tea. She placed the tea in front of the 2 of them. She sat in front of the coffee table and watched the 2 of them play chess. Her eyes were lively, but her temperament was quiet and gentle. Gu Xingyun glanced at her and said softly, "There is a change in Snow Country." Gu Qianchuan raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "It's more than a change. It's a great change." The internal strife of the Polar Ground Alliance had lasted for 3 years, and now it was completely out of control. In the past 2 months, 3 powerful families in Eastern Europe had been destroyed, all of which were the backbone of the Polar Ground Alliance. 2 of them came from Snow Country. In the Dark World, which was already in chaos, all the major forces were like sharks that had smelled the smell of blood. They were all concentrating their strength on Snow Country. If there were no accidents, when the Polar Ground Alliance completely collapsed, Snow Country would also become the decisive battlefield of all the major dark forces. All he lacked now was an opportunity. The matters of the Snow Empire have nothing to do with you. Gu Xingyun said flatly, the final battle is unlikely to happen in these days. At least it will happen after the final maneuver. When Li Tianlan dies, the Li family is bound to fall into chaos. The Samsara Palace would also be affected. No one knew what Qin Weibai would do, but this might become an opportunity for the final battle. At that time, when everyone's attention is diverted, you can go to Wuyue to contact Wang Qinglei, show some attitude, and take the opportunity to completely destroy the Li family. He took a sip of tea and said softly, Jiangxia is an area beyond his power. As long as we support him, he is likely to use Jiangxia as a favor. Battle of Snow Kingdom too far, too big, let them fight. I only want to take into account the immediate benefits. As long as we successfully take down Jiangxia, we will make a profit no matter what. Jiangsu and Zhujiang, Gu Qianchuan pondered and said, it is not difficult to destroy the Li family, but it is not so easy to take Jiangxia. Wu Jingmin has great influence and Zhou Yuanshan has entered Jiangxia. The giant group. The giant group is nothing to worry about. Gu Xingyun shook his head. The military has agreed to the final maneuver plan. Dongqing Rushi has officially abstained today, which is clear enough. This is... Gu Qianchuan raised his eyebrows. You mean Dongqing Wudi has given up on Li Tianlan? Is it surprising? Gu Xingyun's tone was a little surprised. If the military wants to forcibly interfere with the final maneuver of the Sky Academy, the price they need to pay is likely to be the control of the Border Control Corps. Hundreds of thousands of troops for Li Tianlan? Is Li Tianlan so valuable? What? Gu Qianchuan's eyes lit up, getting brighter and brighter. If Dongqing Wudi gave up on Li Tianlan, the Li family would be destroyed, and Jiangxia was not necessary for Zhou Yuanshan to stay. Vaguely, it seemed that the situation was really good. What if Dongqing Wudi didn't give up on Li Tianlan? Or Li Tianlan won the final maneuver? Li Qingqing suddenly said. Her voice was very light and tender. She was definitely a girl who could make anyone feel comfortable. She was light, delicate, charming and youthful, but there was no sharpness or aggressiveness. Gu Xingyun was stunned. Then he shook his head and said calmly, it doesn't make sense. Not to mention that he can't win. Even if he can go against the natural order in the end, he can't walk out of the Sky Academy. His eyes were a little playful. Qianchuan, even if you don't take action, Wang Tianzong will kill him. In Zhongzhou State, no one can really stop the Wang family of Beihai. Just like in this era, no one can stop Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong will kill Li Tianlan? What? Li Qingqing seemed a little curious. Because he is too strong, so he has to die. If he dies in the final maneuver, it is because he is not strong enough, so he also has to die. Gu Xingyun's tone was indifferent. Li Qingqing was silent for a while, then whispered, "The chosen one is really bitter." Gu Xingyun smiled and felt that his daughter's words were really right. All living beings were bitter, and so were the chosen one. Arrogant, domineering, and scrupulous, condescending, and insufferably arrogant. Even if he was invincible in the world and had power over the court, so what? The human world had never been really relaxed and complacent. As amazing as Li Tianlan was, he also had to struggle for survival and the future of the Li family. As powerful as Wang Xingxiao was, he also had to face the next fierce game of the Wang family of Beihai. As calm as Gu Hanshan was, he was bound to be targeted by Gu Qianchuan during the time he had to recuperate. His life would not be much better. As low-key as Jiang Shangyu, didn't he also endure and stay dormant, planning and fighting for the Jiang family to go to a higher level? The more dazzling, the lonelier, the more bitter. What a pity. Gu Xingyun whispered to himself, if Li Tianlan is really willing to bow his head, Kunlun City may give him a way to live, provided that he is really willing to bow his head. He glanced at Li Qingqing. With Li Tianlan's aptitude, if he was really willing to bow his head to Kunlun City, he was even willing to marry his daughter, who was destined to have infinite glory in the future. Such a talent was definitely worth any force to win over at a high price. Gu Qianchuan sneered, and a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. I think he is really confident to think that he is invincible among the young generation. In the team maneuver, he actually wants to go alone. He is arrogant and ignorant. Does he really think he can win? It should be. Gu Xingyun nodded and said, his confidence is not fake. Gu Qianchuan was even more unhappy. He frowned and said gloomily, since he wants to die, we don't have to be polite. The Li family is doomed. If we don't kill him, aren't we going against the natural order? Gu Xingyun did not speak. He suddenly thought of the end of today's symposium. When Li Tianlan left the conference room, he bent over and took off his shoes. At that time, Gu Xingyun felt that this action was absurd. Now that he thought about it, he still felt that it was absurd. What did he mean by taking off his shoes when he left today? Gu Qianchuan shook his head. He did not care about that young nonentity at all. Hans Han and Wang Xingxiao have analyzed that Li Tianlan's current strength should be extremely powerful, but his body is also extremely fragile. He is so fragile that he can't even bear a full blow from them. What do you think? Gu Xingyun nodded and said, it should be right. The time for him to recultivate is too short. If he wants to reach this level in 3 years, it must be the most extreme way. Giving up defense and pursuing absolute combat power is the only feasible way. Only he has wind and thunder veins can bear this way. Gu Qianchuan said yes and reached for the teacup. Pa. There was a soft sound next to the chessboard. Gu Qianchuan's hand had not touched the teacup, but the teacup was torn by an invisible force. The cracks spread from the bottom of the cup, and the tea overflowed and soaked the chessboard. Everyone was stunned. Gu Xingyun, who had been calm, suddenly narrowed his eyes and reached out to stop Gu Qianchuan from speaking. His attention was completely focused in an instant. A subtle sound sounded outside the purple gold pavilion. It was very small, but in Gu Xingyun's ears, it was so huge. The sound of thumping sounded rhythmically. It was very slow but extremely powerful. That was the sound of heartbeat. Everyone could hear this loud yet soft heartbeat. The heartbeat was neither fast nor slow. It was getting closer and closer, but from beginning to end the frequency did not change at all. Another soft sound sounded with the heartbeat. That sound seemed to come from a very far place. It was as if someone was walking lightly across the grass. It was very soft, but the soft footsteps reverberated throughout the entire world. It directly passed through the impregnable purple gold pavilion and fell into the ears of the few of them. Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. The footsteps and the heartbeat sounded at the same time, getting closer and closer. Li Qingqing's face was pale and then it became pale. Unconsciously, her heartbeat seemed to be completely synchronized with the heartbeat outside the door. It pulsed at the same time. The heartbeat was slow and powerful, but it was extremely depressed. Li Qingqing even felt that her breathing became difficult in the heartbeat. A mouthful of blood sprayed from her mouth. She looked at Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan in panic, her eyes full of fear. Gu Qinshuan's body slowly tightened. The light of the purple gold pavilion was extinguished in a flash. The void appeared silently and enveloped him, Gu Xingyun and Li Qingqing. However, the heartbeat outside the door continued to sound in the void where there should be no sound. It was slow and rhythmic. The voice had become very weak, but in the void where no sound should exist, it was like a clap of thunder. Gu Qinshuan's face suddenly changed. Bang! After the heartbeat, light and gentle footsteps stepped on the ground. The footsteps, which were usually ignored by everyone, filled the world. As the foot landed outside the door, the sturdy six-story building of the purple gold pavilion trembled. This was not the sword intent. It was not the momentum. It was the absolute power that was as majestic as the sea, enough to tear mountains and rivers and break the void. Go and see, Gu Xingyun suddenly said. His strength was greatly reduced. In the void around Gu Qinshuan, his voice was hard and hurried. Gu Qinshuan stood up and walked to the door with Gu Xingyun. At this time he did not dare to let Gu Xingyun leave his side. He put his hand on the door handle, pressed the button, and slowly pushed open the alloy door of the capital pavilion, which was nearly 2 meters thick and 5 or 6 meters high. The night sky outside the purple gold pavilion was dimly illuminated by the lights. The sound of water flowing in the huge pool in front of the door was gentle, but the rockery in the water was slightly shaking with the never-ending footsteps. Gu Xingyun raised his head and looked into the distance. In the distant night sky, about 100 meters away, a thin but tall figure was walking over unhurriedly. His figure was getting closer and closer. Gu Xingyun saw that he wore an expressionless metal mask on his face. He was dressed in white and walked barefoot. But the heaven and earth of the purple gold pavilion seemed to tremble as he moved forward. The loud heartbeat kept ringing, and the power was like a wild wolf, sweeping in all directions. Gu Xingyun's pupils suddenly contracted, and he looked ridiculous. The metal mask obviously could not cover anything. The other party obviously did not intend to use this mask to cover anything. Li Tianlan, who they thought could only play hard with the young generation and probably could not beat them, appeared alone in the blink of an eye in front of the two invincible realm experts of Kunlun. Gu Xingyun's heart was in turmoil, but he forced himself to calm down and said coldly, "What are you doing here?" Li Tianlan wore a mask. Gu Xingyun did not call out his identity. For Kunlun City this was definitely an opportunity. "I'm here to see how many dog teeth and legs you have." Li Tianlan's voice was soft, but the eyes behind the mask were full of evil and dangerous light. He did not tell Gu Xingyun. Only when he stepped on the ground with his bare feet could he completely feel the heavy power that belonged to this world. Bang! The heartbeat sounded again. Then it completely disappeared. There was no more nonsense. Li Tianlan lowered his body slightly. He strode forward. A white line suddenly appeared in the deep night sky, cutting through the darkness. The white line turned into a curtain in an instant. Li Tianlan stomped hard on the ground. An unimaginably violent and majestic power was poured into the ground, causing it to boil. The 6-story purple gold pavilion shook violently. The huge rockery in front of the door, tens of meters high, flew directly into the sky in the surging power and broke into countless stones. The water in the pool rushed out in an overturned manner, turning into white waves and water curtains. Trample through mountains and rivers. Li Tianlan's body rose into the air and directly pounced on Gu Xingyun. A young man less than 22 years old took the initiative to attack the war god of Zhongzhou state. At this moment, the night, the water waves, the void, the white clothes, everything seemed to be frozen. There was only madness between heaven and earth. "Close the door." Gu Xingyun took a step back and shouted. Li Tianlan was very strong. But Gu Xingyun believed that no matter how strong he was no match for Gu Qinshuan. But the problem was that deep in his heart he could not completely trust Gu Qinshuan. Bang! Gu Qinshuan took a step back. The alloy gate, which was more than 2 meters thick, was closed. But his own domain shrank in the hall and became extremely heavy. Boom! The next moment the entire purple gold pavilion seemed to fly completely. The alloy gate, which weighed several tons, suddenly broke. Li Tianlan's figure, like the hardest weapon, hit the gate. Alloy fragments flew everywhere. Li Tianlan's figure directly crashed in. Huge alloy fragments floated in the void. Li Tianlan's figure fell directly to the ground in the void without being affected at all. The huge stairs of the purple gold pavilion shook wildly. An inconceivably tyrannical power filled every corner of the void. The silent void melted and collapsed in an instant. The light reappeared in the hall. Trample through the void. Chapter 359. The absolute darkness of the void collapsed and disappeared. The light shone in the hall again. But it seemed that the darkness before was so beautiful that the light that everyone could adapt to was extremely dazzling at this time. The huge alloy fragments hit the ground hard, and the fine dust rose in the hall. The light gently flowed on the white clothes made of cloud silk. Li Tianlan stood there, but it seemed that all the light suddenly gathered. Gu Qianchuan stood in front of Gu Xingyun and Li Qingqing. His eyes were fixed on Li Tianlan, with unconcealable astonishment and rage. Li Tianlan had grown into a figure worthy of everyone's attention. No one would deny this. Gu Qianchuan also attached great importance to him. But he only valued Li Tianlan's potential. He was an invincible realm expert. 3 years ago the Divine List and the Holy List were re-ranked. Gu Qianchuan successfully took the last train and ranked last on the Holy List. Although Li Tianlan was now 9th on the Divine List, everyone knew that it was a special case. Gu Qianchuan could be sure that Li Tianlan's future would be terrible, but the future was the future. At least now, Li Tianlan, who was not in the invincible realm, was just an ant in his eyes. He did not expect that Li Tianlan would appear here tonight. Gu Xingyun did not expect it either. They were just discussing Li Tianlan's life and death. When they felt that the general trend was settled, Li Tianlan came to them alone. The loud beating of the heart and the soft footsteps had completely disappeared. Li Tianlan stood in front of them. In Gu Qianchuan's perception, Li Tianlan had become a ball of light that tore his own domain. He was so real but illusory and unpredictable. Are you in the invincible realm? Gu Qianchuan's voice was hoarse and insidious. His heart kept sinking and falling to the bottom. The invincible realm was above the 4 realms of martial arts. In the dark world it was still a mysterious domain. Even an invincible realm expert could hardly guide others on how to break through this realm. Too many people were stuck in the half-step invincible realm and could not move forward. To enter the domain of the invincible realm, in addition to talent, luck was needed. At present, the most reliable saying was that the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in the 4 realms of martial arts was basically infinitely close to the physical limit of the human body. Half-step invincible realm was the real limit. If one wanted to surpass the limit and enter the invincible realm, he needed to temper his essence, qi and spirit to the peak at the peak of his body. Only when the limit was sublimated would one be invincible. But even if they were invincible, there was still a difference in strength. As strong as Wang Tianzong was, he entered the invincible realm 3 years later than Li Guangtu. But as soon as he entered the invincible realm, his combat capability was close to the peak of the Divine List. As for Gu Qianchuan, even though he entered the invincible realm by luck and practiced hard for several years, he barely entered the Holy List. If one's physique, potential, willpower and talent could be compensated in the 4 realms of martial arts, then once one entered the invincible realm, the gap in these aspects would be large enough to make one desperate. It was like the gap between Wang Tianzong, who ranked first on the Divine List, and Gu Qianchuan, who ranked last on the Holy List. No one doubted his potential. If he entered the invincible realm with his potential, Gu Qianchuan would not even bother to escape. Not to mention him, even Gu Xingyun at his peak was not necessarily his opponent. But if he was really in the invincible realm, why did he have to endure until today? Gu Qianchuan stared at Li Tianlan without blinking. His body gradually tensed up, and the thick darkness and silence once again gathered around him. But the light in the hall was always shining. The void and the light merged with each other, and the whole hall seemed to become pure black and white. The world became an illusory background of black and white. Li Tianlan's figure was incomparably vivid and real. Yes and no. Li Tianlan answered Gu Qianchuan's question. He was telling the truth. After the great breakthrough, he had the dragon vein and the majestic fate. This time, Li Tianlan recultivated the martial arts that was completely different from the 4 realms of martial arts. But no matter how different it was, his goal was still the invincible realm. His body, willpower and sword intent, in terms of condensation, had completely surpassed the half-step invincible realm and could be compared with the invincible realm. But there was still a big gap between his overall combat capability and the real invincible realm. In short, the quality of his martial arts had officially entered the gate of the invincible realm, but the quantity was still far from it. So now he could be regarded as invincible, but he was not really invincible. Gu Qianchuan was a little relieved. Li Tianlan had shifted his gaze and stared at Gu Xingyun. There was undisguised killing intent in his eyes. At today's forum, Li Tianlan carefully felt Gu Xingyun's injury several times. He confirmed that Gu Xingyun's injury was extremely serious, which was the main reason why he came tonight. Gu Qianchuan was extremely strong but only extremely strong. Li Tianlan was sure that Gu Xingyun's injury was his best chance to kill Gu Xingyun in the next few years. If he could succeed tonight, the special warfare group would be leaderless and in a mess, and the rise of the Li family would be right around the corner. Tianlan, are you courting death? Gu Xingyun looked at Li Tianlan with sharp eyes. His voice was still gentle and even his address was very intimate. Li Tianlan smiled and nodded gently. Yes. This was his third sentence tonight. It was also the last sentence. The almost frozen black and white color in the hall suddenly broke in an instant. Li Tianlan took a step forward. A large number of shadows suddenly appeared in the huge and luxurious hall. Li Tianlan was bare-handed, but his whole body was like an invincible divine weapon. He clenched one hand and punched Gu Qianchuan. The light on his body suddenly became extremely dazzling, and his hard arm tore the space. Wherever Li Tianlan passed, darkness and light alternated. The vast power drove his arm and his body. He seemed to be pulled by a violent force and appeared in front of Gu Qianchuan in an instant. A storm appeared out of thin air in the hall. The luxurious handmade sofa, the sturdy white marble tea table, the precious sandalwood tables and chairs, and the scarlet carpet were all broken into ashes in the crazy storm. The entire purple gold pavilion was disappearing. Only Li Tianlan was left in Gu Qianchuan's sight. The wind was biting cold. He narrowed his eyes tightly. The moment the white clothes appeared in front of him, Gu Qianchuan suddenly raised his palm. Bang! A wave of air visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared in the hall. Li Tianlan smashed his fist into Gu Qianchuan's palm. When their fists and palms collided, a large area of twisted space was completely shattered. The turbulent airwaves rushed straight into the sky. In the deafening roar, the ceiling of the purple gold pavilion, which was tens of meters high, suddenly broke. Dust flew up and down and broken stones fell down. Li Tianlan's fist trembled slightly, but he did not stop moving at all. Smooth, swift, and natural but with a kind of hearty violence. He withdrew his fist and lifted his knee. Li Tianlan raised one leg and hit Gu Qianchuan's abdomen with his knee. Gu Qianchuan suddenly roared and pressed his hands down with all his strength, holding down Li Tianlan's blow. His body rose into the sky with Li Tianlan's incredible strength. Gu Qianchuan's eyes were in a trance, and his arms were also trembling slightly. It seemed that a few minutes ago, he had discussed with Gu Xingyun that Li Tianlan's biggest weakness should be his body. Now in retrospect, Gu Qianchuan only felt that he had just said a joke. Li Tianlan's current body was completely unimaginable. His rapid speed and extreme strength were vividly displayed in him. But obviously, Li Tianlan showed no sign of being unable to bear it. At the moment when the fist and palm met, as an invincible realm expert, he had a close fight with the junior of the Li family with all his strength. But the opponent's body was still not overloaded. Gu Qianchuan's body flew higher and higher along with Li Tianlan's strength. Li Tianlan raised his head. Gu Qianchuan raised his hand without expression. In the storm of power, countless densely packed sword intents suddenly burst out. The sword intents condensed around Gu Qianchuan. The sword energy whistled and one after another like real giant swords formed around him. Gu Qianchuan suddenly clenched his fist and punched Li Tianlan in the air. 10 skills of true martial arts, destruction of 5 elements. Boom. Several giant swords condensed around Gu Qianchuan fell at the same time. The ceiling stones were also falling. The sword energy soared into the sky. Li Tianlan's figure suddenly jumped up. Under the metal mask, his expression was completely hidden. Only a pair of eyes were ferocious and cold. He reached out. He clenched his fist. Boom. The falling boulders from the ceiling were smashed by his fist. The sword intents condensed in the air kept trembling under the absolute power. Li Tianlan kept punching. The condensed sword shadows and the falling stones kept breaking as he went up. The torn sword intents spread everywhere in the pavilion. The stairs burst into dust and the solid walls began to crack. The huge pavilion was shaky in the intertwining of power and sword intents. Gu Qianchuan's figure rose again. The sword intents of Kunlun City were like a waterfall. Li Tianlan rose in the air. He punched and stepped in the air. Everything in his way, whether boulders or sword intents, burst into pieces. In this state, Li Tianlan only gave people the impression of madness. Gu Xingyun pulled Li Qingqing and quickly retreated out of the crumbling pavilion. Boom. The deafening noise reverberated on Mount Dong under the night sky. As soon as the father and daughter left the purple gold pavilion, The famous six-story mansion in Zhongzhou State had been smashed into ruins by the fight between Gu Qianchuan and Li Tianlan. Li Qingqing subconsciously turned her head to look back. In the smoke and dust, Li Tianlan and Gu Qianchuan were still fighting. They would not stop until one of them died. Was this Li Tianlan? Li Qingqing was in a daze. She had always heard that her elder brother was also a young heavenly son in Zhongzhou State. But it seemed that until tonight she really saw the power of the so-called heavenly son. But she did not understand. The Li family in Zhongzhou State was famous for its sword intents in the dark world. The 24 moves of sword were unparalleled in the world. Chapter 360. It wasn't just Li Qingqing who was thinking about this. Gu Xingyun and even Gu Qianchuan who was fighting were confused. Why didn't Li Tianlan draw his sword? The Li family's 24 moves of sword was unparalleled in the world. 400 of years in the dark world in terms of martial arts, the Wang family of Beihai was the well-deserved number one. In terms of swordsmanship, Zhuanyuantai really outshone others. Kendo could be said to be the soul of the Li family. Whether the successor of the Li family had a sword in his hand or not was a completely different concept in state. After realizing this problem, Gu Xingyun suddenly remembered that Li Tianlan had never drawn his sword at all since he returned after disappearing for 3 years. To severely injure Gu Yulan, he imitated the great void sword intent. It was the even more incredible sword of Emperor Path that killed Gu Yunxia. The method of defeating Song Ci was very similar to the myriad Tao collection of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But what was his true sword intent? Or the 24 moves of sword? Then why not? Gu Xingyun brought Li Qingqing out of the purple gold pavilion. It was also a mess outside the purple gold pavilion. The clear pond became muddy, and the huge rockery was broken in the grass. Gu Xingyun hid behind a cracked rock. He looked indifferent, but his eyes were cold and gloomy. No one could understand the anger and killing intent in his heart at this moment. After becoming the war god of Zhongzhou State for more than 20 years, this was the first time that he was forced to flee and even needed protection. The power of the murderous weapon's frontal attack was completely incredible. Even if he used the improved version of Immortality Potion of Zhongzhou State to stabilize his injury, his body's various functions had declined to the bottom. Unless he was willing to risk his life, otherwise in his current state if he was alone, even an ordinary Thundershocking Realm expert could completely kill him. If it weren't for the rumors that he was seriously injured and needed a long time to recuperate, and that he needed to stand up to stabilize the morale of the army, he wouldn't have shown up at all in the final maneuver of the 2 academies. Now he forced himself to come to Huading just to go through the motions. No one thought there was a problem. But just when no one thought there was a problem arose. Li Tianlan. The surviving member of the Li family actually came to them above board. What did he take Kunlun City for? Gu Xingyun's mind was buzzing. He knew very well what the consequences of tonight's attack would be. For Li Tianlan, as long as he was alive, there would be no consequences. Gu Xingyun was the war god of Zhongzhou State, and Gu Qianchuan was also an invincible realm expert on the holy list. Moreover, he was the helmsman of Kunlun City that Gu Xingyun promoted during his recovery. If they couldn't keep Li Tianlan here tonight, Kunlun City would never disclose this matter. Once the news was leaked, it would prove that Gu Xingyun was seriously injured and Gu Qianchuan was not strong enough. At that time, where would the dignity of Kunlun City be? If Li Tianlan escaped unscathed tonight, it would be a slap on his and Gu Qianchuan's faces. Not only could they not say anything but they had to endure it. The most important thing was that if they couldn't keep Li Tianlan tonight and something unexpected happened in the final maneuver, how powerful would Li Tianlan be when he recovered from his injury a few years later? Would he really become an invincible realm expert? The purple gold pavilion shook violently in front of Gu Xingyun and Li Qingqing. Countless cracks appeared on the sturdy walls from the inside to the outside. It looked extremely ugly, as if the beauty had been broken. After controlling Kunlun City for more than 20 years, Gu Xingyun felt genuine fear for the first time. Qianchuan, kill him. At any cost. Gu Xingyun suddenly stood up and roared in a voice that was close to a roar. Boom. The entire purple gold pavilion was blasted into pieces by the tremendous power and the majestic sword intent. The roof, the foundation, and the stairs of the 6-story luxurious building seemed to explode at the same time. Rubble flew everywhere, smoke and dust filled the sky, and the surging sword intent swept across the night sky. Storms, frost, flames and thunderbolts filled every inch of the space. It was the killing intent that spread out after the domain formed by the 10th unique domain was torn apart with indomitable determination. The deep night turned into a world of light in an instant. Wind, frost, lightning, and fire surged everywhere, destroying everything like a storm. In the center of the storm, a mournful blood light rose. The red color was extremely brilliant in the chaotic entranced light. The snow-like white clothes fell from mid-air like a meteor, completely out of control and smashed into the pool. The waves splashed. The waves on the surface of the water shook for a moment and then suddenly calmed down. Li Tianlan emerged from the water, getting higher and higher. He stepped on the water and straightened his body. His white clothes made of cloud silk had countless folds, and his waist was completely cut open. Blood flowed down his waist and soon dyed his thighs red. Li Tianlan moved his neck, expressionless, and walked on the water. Gu Qianchuan's figure reappeared in front of Gu Xingyun. Wind, frost, lightning, and fire flickered around him. But this time, instead of forming a domain, they all turned into gloomy and sharp sword intent all over the sky. He held a black dagger in his hand and blood was dripping from the blade. He looked at Li Tianlan quietly, his eyes full of indifference. "You go first," Gu Qianchuan said calmly. He had already tried his best. The sword just now seemed to hurt Li Tianlan, but he did not dare to be careless. Because Li Tianlan had never drawn his sword. In the short fight just now, Gu Qianchuan had roughly figured out Li Tianlan's strength. The essence of Li Tianlan's strength was the real invincible realm, but his own accumulation was far from enough. He had enough quality but not enough quantity. By the standard of the ordinary invincible realm, Li Tianlan was at most equivalent to half or even one-third of the ordinary invincible realm. But one-third of the invincible realm was also the invincible realm. In this state, Li Tianlan's short-term outbreak was definitely not inferior to the weakest invincible realm. He was not invincible realm, but he already had the quality of the invincible realm. There were few such examples in the dark world, but there were always some amazing figures who could do it. In the past 3 years in the dark world, there were 3 people who could do it and all of them were from Zhongzhou state. Such figures could not be called invincible realm experts for the time being, but they had paved the way to enter the invincible realm, so they were called the combat capability of the invincible realm. Tribulation 3 years ago. Dijiang of the Wang family of Beihai in the past 3 years. And Li Tianlan who returned 3 years later. It was all the same. Gu Qianchuan suddenly felt lucky that 3 years had passed. If he had not entered the holy list 3 years ago, he might have been defeated by Li Tianlan today. In Li Tianlan's current state, Gu Qianchuan was confident that he could firmly suppress him. The sword stroke just now was proof. But if such a figure went crazy, Gu Qianchuan also had concerns. At least he could not be sure that he could absolutely guarantee Gu Xingyun's safety. Because Li Tianlan had never drawn his sword. After 3 years, Li Tianlan had never shown his own sword intent. Gu Qianchuan was almost sure. Li Tianlan's sword intent was no longer the 24 moves of sword. Although the 24 moves of sword was strong, it was not worth hiding. There was no doubt that he hid his sword to deal with Gu Xingyun at the most critical moment. As long as Gu Xingyun left first, he could really kill Gu Qianchuan freely. "Are you sure?" Gu Xingyun asked. Gu Qianchuan thought, "How could I be sure? I still don't know how strong the sword intent of this little monster is." The waves in the pool fell down and calmed down in an instant. Li Tianlan began to speed up. His white clothes were stained with blood, but his speed did not slow down. He was extremely fast and light. In a trance he was like a breeze. 30%. The corner of Gu Qianchuan's mouth twitched. As soon as he finished speaking, the wind, frost, lightning, and fire around him surged again. The sword intent all over the sky with countless brilliance completely shrouded Li Tianlan like a sky curtain. Li Tianlan roared and rushed forward. He stepped out of the water and rushed to the sky. His figure was like a white rainbow crashing into the sky curtain. The sky curtain full of violent sword intent was directly torn by his body. Li Tianlan's movements were getting faster and faster. Wherever his white clothes passed, all he brought was the simplest speed and strength. It was a kind of bravery and fearlessness that caused one's mind to tremble. Gu Xingyun took a look at Li Qingqing and turned to leave without hesitation. The elites of Kunlun City stationed in the purple gold pavilion finally reacted. Several specially modified black Mercedes-Benz quickly drove over. Dozens of elites rushed to the purple gold pavilion from all directions. Some of them rushed to Li Tianlan. The other part escorted Gu Xingyun to leave Winter Mountain. Gu Xingyun got into a Mercedes-Benz. Several Mercedes-Benz formed a motorcade and left the purple gold pavilion at full speed. The purple gold pavilion had become a ruin. The smoke and dust had not yet dissipated. The sword intent around Gu Qianquan had suddenly condensed to the limit. The white clothes that tore the sky curtain came to Gu Qianquan. It was still a punch that was not flashy but filled with extreme violence. Gu Qianquan grinned and did not retreat at all. He punched with surging sword intent. The piercingly cold wind was silent. The cold and hot alternated in the wind. The fire and frost completely disappeared. Only the extremely cold and hot wind were turbulent. Gu Qianquan's whole body lit up. A touch of blue appeared in the whistling wind. The blue light flickered slightly and then bloomed under the starry sky in the most ferocious manner. All the frost, lightning and fire were condensed in the blue light arc. Every ray of light was sword intent and power. Thousands of sword intents broke out at the same time, like a mountain flood. This was the most balanced and perfect unique technique of Kunlun City, 10 skills of true martial arts. This was the peak use of 10 skills of true martial arts by Gu Qianquan. It was the integration of several unique techniques at the same time. It was his strongest move. The 8 Supreme Sword Dance and the 5 Elements Extermination were in full bloom in the 10th unique domain. The brilliant sword light completely took away the brilliance of the night sky. The surging and endless light swallowed Li Tianlan in an instant. Where Gu Qianquan's fist wind went, all the sword light seemed to be guided and burst out. The punch with the ultimate sword intent collided with Li Tianlan's fist. A natural air wave suddenly appeared in the ruins of the purple gold pavilion. Wherever the air wave passed, the ruins of the purple gold pavilion completely turned into smoke and dust. Li Tianlan's white clothes were completely broken, and he was covered in blood. The surging sword light completely wrapped him. His body was completely out of balance and he was blasted into the distance. Gu Qianquan's figure staggered and took a deep breath. He was unable to chase in a short time. He did not look upset but only a sneer. The place where Li Tianlan landed was where the elites of Kunlun City gathered in the purple gold pavilion. There were nearly 20 people. 1 was in the thunder-shocking realm, 5 were in the fire-flaming realm, and the others were at least in the ice-condensing realm. This kind of strength was indeed ordinary. But the most desirable place of Kunlun City's martial arts was the sword formation. The unique technique could form a sword formation. The 20 elites could naturally form a formation. Li Tianlan's figure fell, and the place where the elites of Kunlun City gathered lit up with fire. Gu Qianquan took a deep breath and rushed over without hesitation. Li Tianlan wanted to kill Gu Xingyun. Tonight was an opportunity. Kunlun City wanted to kill Li Tianlan. In this situation it was also an opportunity. The best opportunity. The 20 elites of Kunlun City gathered in one place. Frost and flames shone above Li Tianlan. The thunder-shocking realm expert at the forefront was all blue. The blue electric arc blended into the fire and disappeared in an instant. All the icicles and coldness merged into the fire and disappeared in an instant. In the crowd, only the fire was fiercely moving and burning the sky. All the sword intent of Gu Qianquan completely disappeared after the outbreak. Li Tianlan's figure fell into the fire. The fire burned and twisted the air. His figure became a little blurred. Gu Qianquan's cold eyes showed a hint of a smile, and the sword intent rose again. No matter how exquisite the sword formation formed by 20 elites was, it was difficult to threaten Li Tianlan, even if he was seriously injured. But the sword body formed by 20 elite cannon fodder was enough to make Li Tianlan's injury more serious. Gu Qianquan could be sure that with such a serious injury, Li Tianlan would die tonight. Li Tianlan's body completely fell into the fire. Crack! There was a slight crisp sound in the night. It was like the sound of metal colliding. It was also like the long sword was unsheathed. The sound was very light but it was so slight. In a trance, Gu Qianquan heard Li Tianlan's gentle, weak but extremely loud heartbeat. The long sword was unsheathed. The smile on his face suddenly froze. The sword light in the purple gold pavilion dissipated, the starry sky dimmed, and the fire disappeared. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, without any strange phenomenon. Gu Qianquan did not react at all. Not far away, the sword formation formed by the elites of Kunlun City had suddenly dissipated without a trace. There was really no trace. Along with the fire, the 20 elites of Kunlun City also dissipated. There was no blood, no screams, and even no dust. The fire, the crowd, and everything seemed to have never existed. In an instant they became complete nothingness. The ruins suddenly became incomparably quiet. The world was quiet. Gu Qianquan stood stiffly in place. He looked at the scene in front of him incredulously and even blinked. This feeling was like a dream. The fire that symbolized Li Tianlan's death disappeared. The elites of Kunlun City disappeared and Li Tianlan also disappeared. What sword intent was this? Was it sword intent? Gu Qianchuan was suddenly shocked. It was not until this time that he realized something. Li Tianlan disappeared. He was not here and he was not dead. Where could he go? Gu Qianchuan's scalp was completely numb in an instant. His heart was cold and numb. He was definitely stronger than Li Tianlan. But when he had the upper hand he did not watch Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan got rid of him and disappeared. How could Gu Xingyun survive? He was crazy, stupid and panicked. Gu Qianchuan's mind was in a mess for a moment, and he was even at a loss. Gu Xingyun must not die. At the very least he could not die now. That was why he and Gu Xingyun could trust each other. Gu Xingyun, who was seriously injured, still ranked 5th on the divine list. He had enough strength to match the title of the war god of Zhongzhou state. It was extremely important for Kunlun City. If Gu Xingyun died, Gu Qianchuan could not defend Kunlun City at all. He must not die. Gu Qianchuan, who was extremely confused, suddenly turned around and was about to rush in the direction of Gu Xingyun's retreat at all costs. A drop of blood fell in front of him. Gu Qianchuan was stunned and a little confused. Another drop of blood fell. I am injured? He thought blankly, why don't I remember? In a mess he saw the third drop of blood. Gu Qianchuan's body shook violently and he completely reacted. He did not know that he was injured, so he was naturally not injured. This blood was not his. Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan. Gu Qianchuan suddenly raised his head. A silver light suddenly appeared in the starry night sky. It was the most brilliant silver that Gu Qianchuan had ever seen in his life. It was gorgeous, vivid, dreamy, but with indescribable fierceness. The silver light sprinkled down like stars falling one after another. There was a hand with a silver bracelet above Gu Qianchuan. The silver bracelet had completely unfolded at this time and turned into a long sword. Falling stars. The bloody palm held the hilt of the long sword. The silver light was so brilliant and so illusory. The moment Gu Qianchuan raised his head, the falling star sword suddenly stabbed down. There was no wind, thunder, lightning, or fire. Even the air did not have the slightest change. The silver light gathered. The falling star stabbed straight. A sword was a sword. A pure sword, a real sword, an illusory sword. A sword was a sword without any superfluous meaning. Wherever the swift and fierce sword light passed, there was no sound. There was only destruction left. This sword was so perfect. Gu Qianchuan, who was anxious and confused, did not have the slightest defense. The silver sword light was getting closer and closer. Gu Qianchuan suddenly let out the most miserable scream in his life. The silent and empty void domain instantly rose. The next second, the silver light almost pierced the void without any stagnation and continued to fall silently. The bloody light in the sky rose, solidified, and floated in the torn void. In the crazy scream, the power of the invincible realm on Mount Dong broke out completely. The endless light covered everything. An arm flew directly into the sky in the bloody rain. Blood spilled. Gu Qianchuan no longer cared about Gu Xingyun. Without hesitation, he fled in the opposite direction of Gu Xingyun. His arm rushed for a distance in the air and then floated in the broken void. The silver sword light slowly converged. The sword intent swept over and the void disappeared. Gu Qianchuan's arm also disappeared completely, as if it had never existed. The white shadow full of blood flashed in the air. Without hesitation, it directly rushed in the direction of Gu Xingyun's departure. Li Tianlan did not know how strong he was, but he knew very well that if it was a life-and-death fight, he would not be Gu Qianchuan's opponent. Even if Gu Qianchuan was the last on the holy list, he could not win. This was a very obvious matter. So he did not hide anything at all and directly told Lin Yuxian his thoughts. After 3 years of great achievements and returning to Zhongzhou state, Li Tianlan's biggest trump card was the sword intent that he had never shown to the world. The most intangible sword intent. This was also the core of this plan. When Gu Xingyun came to Huading, he took Gu Qianchuan with him, which was equivalent to taking the core protection force of Kunlun City. Li Tianlan wanted to kill Gu Xingyun. He was not Gu Qianchuan's opponent, but he thought that he was not far from Gu Qianchuan. So he and Lin Yuxian appeared on Mount Dong. The plan was actually very simple. Li Tianlan was sure that as long as he gave Gu Qianchuan enough pressure, Gu Xingyun would definitely retreat alone according to his character. This was not only because of Gu Xingyun's caution. At the same time, it was also because Li Tianlan was absolutely sure of his value. The more powerful he was, the more Kunlun City wanted to kill him. As long as he vaguely showed the strength to compete with Gu Qianchuan, Gu Xingyun would definitely let Gu Qianchuan attack him at all costs. He retreated first not only for the sake of safety, but also for the finishing work after his death. So Li Tianlan never drew his sword from beginning to end, even if he was seriously injured. He wanted Gu Xingyun to retreat alone when he showed his strength. At the same time, he was reluctant to give up this opportunity to leave Gu Qianchuan to kill him. As soon as Gu Xingyun left, he began to draw his sword. Li Tianlan's plan was to use the intangible sword intent to temporarily get rid of Gu Qianchuan's sight and take advantage of Gu Qianchuan's confusion to launch a sneak attack and severely injure or even kill Gu Qianchuan. As for Gu Xingyun would feel that no one in Zhongzhou state dared to kill him. And it would not take too long for Gu Qianchuan to return to him. So he withdrew easily and decisively. He was right. No one in Zhongzhou state dared to kill Gu Xingyun, even the Wang family of Beihai. But there was an heir of the Lin clan beside Li Tianlan. On the top of Mount Dong. When Lin Yuxian saw the black Mercedes-Benz leave Purple Gold Pavilion, he already knew that Li Tianlan's plan had succeeded. And it was very successful. He did not know whether Li Tianlan could use his sword intent to severely injure Gu Qianchuan. But to do this, Lin Yuxian had to carry out his task. In the plan, after Li Tianlan severely injured or killed Gu Qianchuan, he would meet him as soon as possible. The two of them would join hands to kill the war god of Zhongzhou state. The plan was halfway through. Lin Yuxian had no reason to retreat. He did not want to make trouble, but he was never afraid of it. The Mercedes-Benz went down the mountain road and was getting closer to the road under his feet. Lin Yuxian stood up and silently adjusted the machine gun beside him. Or, it was something like a machine gun. This was a weapon fixed on the top of the mountain. Its shape was similar to a multi-barrel machine gun, but its caliber was 6 or 7 times larger than that of an ordinary machine gun. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a machine gun. A large string of bullets hung on the weapon. This kind of bullets, together with a machine gun, had never been in service in any country's army in the world. The code name was Rainstorm, and the bullets were all small armor-piercing shells. This was a surprise for Gu Xingyun. The Mercedes-Benz team was getting closer and closer. Lin Yuxian grinned and held the body of Rainstorm. "It's really exciting," he whispered to himself and aimed the muzzle at the motorcade on the road down the mountain. At a distance of nearly 800 meters, he fired directly. There was a sudden thunder on the top of Mount Dong. The dazzling and horrible nightmare-like tongue of fire swallowed wildly. Hundreds of small armor-piercing shells rushed out of the muzzle and poured out almost crazily. Rainstorm fired at the top of the mountain. For a time, the violent gunshots almost filled the entire Mount Dong. Da-da-da. The specially modified Mercedes-Benz motorcade was completely in chaos. The bodies, roofs, and windows were broken under the pouring of the armor-piercing shells. 2 Mercedes-Benz rolled down the mountain at the first time. After the explosion, they turned into a towering fire wave. The Mercedes-Benz in the middle lit up at the first time. The fire lit up inside the Mercedes-Benz, but it quietly filled the space outside and wrapped the entire car body. Rainstorm was still pouring wildly. Countless bullets were melted by the fire, and a small number of bullets hit the specially modified Mercedes-Benz. The Mercedes-Benz was bumpy, but it still accelerated forward. "It's a little interesting," Lin Yuxian said with a smile and smashed the Rainstorm in his hand, which was about to run out of bullets. He began to stride along the top of the mountain. One car and one person were completely parallel on the top of the mountain and the road. The Mercedes-Benz was getting faster and faster. Lin Yuxian stretched his body and took a step forward. Then he jumped directly from the top of the mountain, which was hundreds of meters high. The Mercedes-Benz was surrounded by fire. Lin Yuxian's body lit up with lightning. His figure jumped from the top of the mountain and landed directly on the roof of the car with a bang. The body of the Mercedes-Benz was almost completely deformed under the impact of the distance, but it still rushed forward without stopping. Lin Yuxian sneered and directly pulled out a soft sword from his waist. The soft sword was completely straight as steel in the trembling. Lin Yuxian inserted the sword into the roof of the car. Vaguely, a woman's scream came from the car below. Lin Yuxian inserted the sword into the roof of the car to fix his position. He leaned forward and smashed the thick bulletproof glass with a bang. His hand went straight down from the windshield and held the steering wheel. Hard. Crack. The Mercedes-Benz continued to rush forward at a speed of more than 120 kilometers per hour, but Lin Yuxian directly pulled the steering wheel off. The car tilted on the mountain road and hit the car next to it at a super high speed. The whole car exploded in the violent collision. In the fire, Gu Xingyun, who was covered in blood, escaped from the Mercedes-Benz with Li Qingqing. Lin Yuxian quietly floated above the two people, expressionless. The software in his hand shook gently and then became straight again. A dim yellow color spread to the sword edge. Suddenly the sword intent around Lin Yuxian soared into the sky. Ninth blade to dusk. There was no hesitation. No hesitation. The dim yellow sword light swept across the valley. Lin Yuxian and the sword united and rushed straight to Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun's eyes were cold and angry. As soon as his body moved, Li Qingqing beside him suddenly screamed, "No!" She directly stood in front of Gu Xingyun and opened her hands. "No!" Gu Xingyun suddenly roared recklessly. Lin Yuxian instinctively withdrew the sword, but it was completely too late. Chapter 361. There was a big chapter at 12 o'clock last night. Don't miss it. That chapter was yesterday. The wreckage of the car explosion was still burning. The blazing flame and the dim sword intent merged perfectly. The night faded away in the sword intent, and the mountain road became clear. Time seemed to slow down all of a sudden. Gu Xingyun's roar was lengthened countless times, and all the sounds seemed to emerge bit by bit, messy and broken. The sharp sword gradually moved forward in the dim light. Li Qingqing's mind was full of all the fragments of her life that had just begun. From small to large, from far to near, it became clearer and clearer. She knew that her father didn't like her when she was very young. She was the only daughter of Gu Xingyun, the god of war in Zhongzhou state. She had a noble identity, but she had almost never received the favor she should have enjoyed. In her childhood memory, in addition to the indifference between her parents, all her impressions were the never-ending snow outside Kunlun City. Her mother often sat in her room motionless. Everyone in the Gu family looked at her with complicated eyes. Her half-brother seemed to always dislike her, and her father, who was closest to her, was also lukewarm to her. In Li Qingqing's memory, her father seemed to have only held her a few times since she was a child. When she called him, he would nod, smile when he was in a good mood, and touch her head when he was in a better mood. Sometimes he would ask her what she wanted. This happened very rarely, so Li Qingqing asked for a lot every time. Gu Xingyun also agreed indifferently, and then brought her all the things she wanted every time. On her birthday when she was 8 years old, Gu Xingyun asked her again what she wanted. She thought for a long time and then carefully said that she wanted to practice martial arts. So after that day she had a few super famous teachers even in the whole dark world, and she began to get in touch with Kunlun City's 10 skills of true martial arts. Gu Xingyun never refused her request. That kind of silent promise was deep and gentle. But most of the time his performance had been calm and indifferent. Li Qingqing could always sense the huge gap between her and her father. All the care and doting from him were hesitant and tangled. Even the occasional tenderness seemed so unfamiliar. It was not that Li Qingqing had never been wronged, but as she grew older she became more and more indifferent to this matter. There might be many stories between her parents, but no matter whether those stories were happy or sad, gratitude or hatred, no matter how distant the relationship between father and daughter was, as a father, he had given his daughter everything she wanted since she was young. He had never been stingy. The long sword with the dim yellow sword intent moved forward with an indomitable will. Countless scenes flashed in Li Qingqing's mind, from the beginning to the end, and from the beginning to the end. Li Qingqing suddenly laughed. She suddenly remembered her birthday when she was 9. On that day her eldest brother, who had always disliked her since she was a child, directly threw the birthday cake prepared for her by Kunlun City on the ground. At the same time he tore a plush toy given to her by her mother. Seeing this scene her father did not say a word. Instead he slapped her eldest brother and sent him flying. The reason why Li Qingqing remembered this scene was not because of the joy she felt when she saw her elder brother being beaten, but because her father said something very calmly while waiting for her elder brother who was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. "No matter what, she is still your sister." Li Qingqing wanted to look back at Gu Xingyun. But her thinking was too fast and her movements were too slow. She had no time to turn her head, so naturally she could not see Gu Xingyun's expression. This man, who had been worthy of Zhongzhou State and Kunlun City for many years, might have many mistakes and even sins. But from the standpoint of Kunlun City, no one was qualified to say that Gu Xingyun was a bad person. No matter what, he was also her father. So when the sword light fell she pounced on it. Without hesitation. The long sword penetrated her chest. The 9th blade, dusk. But dusk was not warm. Instead it was bitterly cold. The fragmented syllables in Gu Xingyun's throat finally converged into a word. No. It seemed that it was not until the moment when Li Qingqing rushed up to stand in front of him that Gu Xingyun really realized how important this daughter was in his heart. He also liked Li Qingqing before, but it was a kind of restrained and reserved love. This kind of love did not affect him to exchange Li Qingqing for the benefits that Kunlun City needed. Because she was Li Shi's daughter. Gu Xingyun also liked Li Shi. But he felt that Li Shi was dirty. Gu Xingyun would not hesitate to exchange her daughter for some things. But it was not until this delicate figure stood in front of him that he completely understood that Li Qingqing was not only Li Shi's daughter but also his own blood. And this time what Li Qingqing exchanged for was his life. It was best to be alive. So he made a profit. But why was his heart so painful? Gu Xingyun's voice was loud and hoarse. This word was shouted so hastily and mournfully that his throat was hurt when he spoke, making a bloody taste in his throat. Gu Xingyun stood up straight. At the moment when Lin Yuxian intended to withdraw his sword but instinctively stabbed forward, Gu Xingyun pulled Li Qingqing and took a step back. A sea of rage suddenly appeared on the burning mountain road. Before all the sword intent at dusk could take effect in Li Qingqing's body, it was shattered by the sea of rage that suddenly appeared. The sea of rage roared, and the majestic and incredible sword intent surged and gathered in an instant. Gu Xingyun's face was pale, but the sea of rage that gathered in the sky in an instant had unparalleled anger and majesty. This was Gu Xingyun's sword intent. In a desperate situation, Gu Xingyun almost desperately restored part of his strength. The sword intent all over the sky became extremely solid and sticky. The sea of rage composed of sword intent covered the night sky, as if the whole world was oppressing Lin Yuxian's living space. Gu Xingyun held his daughter and took a step forward. The sea of rage in the air suddenly surged. Under the night sky, there seemed to be the undulating sound of the tide rising and falling on Winter Mountain. In front of Lin Yuxian, huge waves hundreds of meters high with cold killing intent hit Lin Yuxian mercilessly. This was the riot of the whole sea of rage, with suffocating despair and oppression. Under the huge waves, Lin Yuxian's long sword pierced straight into the sky. For the first time, there was a touch of ruthlessness in his eyes that did not match his gentle appearance. The huge waves with infinite sword intent hit down extremely quickly and violently. Lin Yuxian roared. In the sea of rage, thunder suddenly rose. The overwhelming thunder erupted hysterically with Lin Yuxian as the center in an instant. The endless sword intent filled the air and turned into a sea. The sea was turbulent, bringing up wild waves composed of sword intent. Lin Yuxian stood in the middle of the sea of rage and stabbed upward with his sword. The blue light that rose into the sky was sharp and condensed. For a moment, the whole sea of rage seemed to be dyed blue by Lin Yuxian's sword light alone. Gu Xingyun's face suddenly changed. He thought that this young man was just a temporary helper that Li Tianlan found, but he did not expect that the other party would be so powerful. Who was this? With this sword move alone, the other party was enough to be ranked among the young heavenly sons in Zhongzhou state. The sword intent of this sword move was abundant and overbearing. In Gu Xingyun's view, it even surpassed that of his son, Gu Hanshan. 24 moves of sword? Was there such a figure in the Li family besides Li Tianlan? The infinite thunder light went straight up in the deep sea. The strong and resolute sword light stirred the sea of rage full of sword intent and moved forward. Gu Xingyun's face became paler and paler. But he insisted on taking another step forward. The surging sea of rage was completely crazy. The sea water condensed by sword intent smashed toward Lin Yuxian overwhelmingly. Lin Yuxian's blue sword light finally rushed out of the blockade and confinement of the sea of rage and went straight into the sky. The shocking thunder in the ninth heaven. The blue sword light turned into a dangerous pale in an instant. The sound of thunder surged. Wherever the sword energy passed, the dense lightning suddenly covered the night sky. Countless lightning began to gather in one place. Below the sky, above the sea of rage, the lightning that gathered turned into beams of light connecting the sky and the earth. The amazing light rushed directly into the sea of rage with the crazy and broken sword energy. The sea was completely boiling. Gu Xingyun finally recognized this sword move. This was the absolute sword in the 24 moves of sword. 22nd blade break of the sky. Gu Xingyun suddenly turned his head. In the middle of the sea of rage, the young man who evaporated half of his sword energy was already covered with blood, but he stood straight and did not step back. He was so unyielding. Gu Xingyun's eyes were in a trance, but his killing intent became more determined. Li Tianlan alone had already put pressure on Kunlun City. With this young man, if they grew up, how could Kunlun City survive in the future? The boiling sea of rage shrank in the beam of light that penetrated the sky and the earth. The majestic sea continued to shrink and gather. So the sea became a condensed river, but the sword intent became more and more powerful. Gu Xingyun was desperately trying to improve his strength. He took the third step forward. The raging long river was like a waterfall, rushing directly to Lin Yuxian, who was covered with blood. It was mighty and powerful. It was a fatal blow. Lin Yuxian stared at the long river in the air. Death was approaching, but there was no weakness in his eyes, only high fighting intent. The raging long river boiled and rolled. The sword intent continued to condense and white waves emerged. The long river poured into the earth from the sky. Lin Yuxian raised the sword in his hand. The sword light did not light up. Gu Xingyun froze for a moment. He suddenly found that his long river of sword intent had completely stopped in the air. How was this possible? Gu Xingyun's brain was in a mess. The long white river was surging, but it no longer moved forward. Gu Xingyun, whose eyes were already in a trance, finally saw the end of the long river. There was a white dot there. It was small and illusory, almost completely integrated with the long white river. That was Bai Li Tianlan. Gu Xingyun's somewhat confused eyes instantly became focused and deep. Li Tianlan, who appeared on the battlefield silently, stood in front of Lin Yuxian. His body floated slightly in the air. There was no violent sword intent. He just stretched out a hand. A finger moved forward. With just one finger he directly blocked the whole mighty long river. For the first time, there was a look of horror in Lin Yuxian's eyes. He was not shocked by Li Tianlan's ease. He was very close to Li Tianlan, so he knew the power of Li Tianlan's finger. His movement was very simple, but the power of his whole body seemed to be completely condensed in that finger so that he could block the whole long river. Lin Yuxian could clearly feel that the endless power was consumed in Li Tianlan's body with this stalemate. The speed was getting faster and faster and it did not stop. But Li Tianlan seemed to be unaware of it. His power had no end at all, and it seemed that he could support any form of consumption. This was not something that could be explained by the wind and thunder veins. Such power was almost far beyond the foundation that the wind and thunder veins brought to the body. Li Tianlan stretched out his finger. The huge consumption of power suddenly began to increase exponentially. At the end of the river, the waves rolled and turned into a huge whirlpool in an instant. Li Tianlan looked at the whirlpool in front of him with a calm expression. He suddenly smiled and whispered, "Break. Break." It was not shattering. It was not breaking. It was breaking the sea. Sea-breaking move. This was the sword intent that had never appeared in the dark world. It was based on the 24 moves of sword, but it was beyond them. This was Li Tianlan's own sword intent. One finger broke the sea. A breeze rose in the night sky. The wind was not fierce, but it was extremely cold. The breeze blew through the river. In an instant, the whole turbulent long river exploded in the wind. The splashes condensed by the sword intent were flying everywhere in the night. The river was scattered in the air. Under the night sky there were sword intent and splashes everywhere. The long river was divided into two into four into 8, thousands of them, and finally scattered quietly in the night sky. Gu Xingyun stared at Li Tianlan as if he had seen a ghost. One sword broke the sea. But from beginning to end, Gu Xingyun did not see Li Tianlan's sword intent clearly. Illusory, shapeless, and formless. What the hell was this? Li Tianlan looked at Gu Xingyun quietly. Without the obstruction of the long river of sword intent, Gu Xingyun's figure became extremely clear. He strode through the air soundlessly and without any aura. However, he carried with him an extreme sense of danger. Li Tianlan, how dare you kill me? Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and suddenly shouted angrily, "Have you ever thought about the consequences?" Li Tianlan didn't bother to talk at all and just moved forward. He came to kill. Since he could fight, why did he make a fuss? "You are forcing me. You are forcing me." Gu Xingyun suddenly became furious. "How dare you force me?" The quiet night suddenly froze. All the light disappeared completely in an instant. The space within a radius of 100 meters fell into absolute silence in an instant. In the darkness, the violent sword intent surged up and down with tyrannical power, as if to destroy everything. Gu Xingyun finally condensed his domain by force. This was his 10th unique domain. It was also the most authentic 10th unique domain in the whole dark world today. Even if he couldn't exert all his strength now, it was still the most authentic one. Li Tianlan's footsteps finally stopped in the 10th unique domain. It was dark in the domain. But his figure was still hovering freely instead of floating out of control. The tyrannical sword intent that pervaded the domain strangled him madly. This was like a real unique domain of its own, without the slightest vitality. In the darkness, Li Tianlan raised his arm. In the domain and sword intent that were colder than the surging momentum, Li Tianlan's palm suddenly burst out a pure light. The dazzling light was released to the extreme in his hand, illuminating the void. His blood-stained broken white clothes became extremely real in an instant in the 10th unique domain. Illusory domain, illusory sword intent. Only he was real. Only light. In an instant, Li Tianlan's aura began to rise wildly, rushed out of the domain, crossed the sky and reached the starry sky. At this moment, Li Tianlan was still in the domain. But the so-called domain, the so-called winter mountain, and the so-called night all became fake. Only his figure was real. Because it was real. So it looked extremely huge. It was as if the whole world was under his feet. Finally, sword intent appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. He raised his arm. His movement was neither fast nor slow, but it seemed as if it was natural for him to stretch his arm. All the light in his hand turned into sword intent, which could really tear the sky. The sword was a killing weapon. It could kill people, break the sea, and naturally it could cut the sky. Cutting the sky. Only his own sword intent was the most suitable for him. The most suitable and the strongest. The dazzling light completely bloomed in Li Tianlan's hand. One finger broke the sea. One sword cut the sky. The 10th unique domain began to shake fiercely. The darkness receded, and the whole domain completely melted where the light spread. Gu Xingyun's eyes lit up. It was a battle of life and death, but his eyes were intoxicated. He finally saw Li Tianlan's sword intent. Even if it was only one move, it caused an extremely violent impact on his heart. This was the road of the chosen one. This was the sword of the chosen one. Martial arts, martial arts. If ordinary people's martial arts were still in the category of martial arts, the so-called road of the chosen one was equivalent to entering the domain of Tao. The gorgeous and dangerous light was still blooming. Gu Xingyun seemed to see a real new world. Vaguely, he saw a more powerful road, and he really saw the gap between him and a few people like Wang Tianzong. This was what he had been dreaming of. Gu Xingyun breathed quickly. He was sure that if he could survive tonight and had a few years to recover, he could definitely make further progress within 10 years. Even if he could not surpass Wang Tianzong, he could almost reach the level of that god. The 10th unique domain was still shaking. Gu Xingyun's desire to win was stronger than ever. He spat out a mouthful of blood, held his daughter in his arms tightly, and suddenly roared. In the domain that was on the verge of collapse, countless sword intents suddenly exploded. No matter how highly Tianlan's swordsmanship and sword intent were, absolute quantity could still make up for the lack of quality. The light blooming in Li Tianlan's hand was suppressed again. Gu Xingyun kept moving, and the 10th unique domain, which had been almost destroyed, expanded again. In the darkness, the extreme light lit up again with a cold snort from Li Tianlan. The light that was enough to tear the sky suddenly radiated and soared. The expanded 10th unique domain and the light completely blended. There was a sudden silence in the night. The darkness and the light completely blended together, collapsing and shrinking silently. Then there was a loud noise that resounded through the whole winter mountain. After the loud noise, the domain and the sword light dissipated at the same time. Li Tianlan, who was covered in blood, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and slowly stood up straight. The field became quiet again. Lin Yuxian sat alone on the ground and his face was pale. However, Gu Xingyun had already taken Li Qingqing away at top speed after the final outbreak. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, clenched his fists tightly and did not speak. The sirens and flashing lights at the foot of the mountain lit up at the same time. The garrison of Huading and the police arrived at Winter Mountain almost at the same time. Chapter 362. Second update. After midnight. When Li Tianlan carried Lin Yuxian, who was seriously injured and weak, into the Silver Lake Villa in Winter Mountain, the police station and garrison of Huading had almost surrounded the entire Winter Mountain. Warning lights flashed all over the mountain, and a large number of troops occupied every passage up and down the mountain. The atmosphere was grim and dignified. Li Tianlan entered the villa, closed the door and put Lin Yuxian on the sofa. Tianlan, is this the property of the Li family? Lin Yuxian leaned stiffly on the sofa, and his arms trembled unconsciously. It was crazy enough to fight against the god of war of Zhongzhou State with the strength close to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, even if the god of war of Zhongzhou State was seriously injured and his strength was greatly reduced. The reason why the 22nd blade was called one of the 24 moves of sword was that the sword energy was extremely strong, but it also meant the greatest consumption. In Lin Yoshin's current realm, such a sword move was absolutely forced. Once the 22nd blade was used, Gu Xingyun would be seriously injured by his own sword intent even if he didn't do anything. Lin Yoshin's body almost collapsed when he was caught between Gu Xingyun and his own sword intent. If Li Tianlan arrived a few seconds later, the young heavenly son of the Lin clan might really die on the spot tonight. It's my first time here. Li Tianlan rummaged out a medicine box and said flatly, the nominal owner of the villa belongs to a Germanic businessman. Clip Jason Andres. Seems to be this name. A Germanic businessman with no special background. His real identity is the supermaster in Samsara Palace, second only to military counselor and saint. His code name is General. In other words, this was Qin Weibai's property. Qin Weibai had 9 properties in Huading, and there were 2 mansions on Winter Mountain that cost more than 9 figures. The villa in Silver Lake was one of them. When Qin Weibai first appeared around him 3 years ago, she collected his fingerprints. With his fingerprints, Li Tianlan could enter and exit all her properties at will. When the army surrounded Winter Mountain, the Silver Lake Villa area, where the rich gathered and the great hidden power, was the best hiding place. Oh, General, I've heard of it. Lin Yuxian whistled, but his smile was already a little forced. His face was pale. Because of excessive blood loss, his body became extremely cold, and his teeth began to tremble uncontrollably. Li Tianlan frowned and waved his hand. Silently, Lin Fengting's broken clothes disappeared without a trace. F***ck me. Lin Yoxian's face changed. He took a deep breath and said in shock, "What are you doing?" F***ck your sister, apply the medicine. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. Lie down. If you don't stop bleeding, you won't be able to see the sun tomorrow. Damn you, my sister is only 17 this year. Lin Yuxian gnashed his teeth. Don't even think about it, get lost. Li Tianlan laughed and scolded him. He applied some extremely expensive hemostatic medicine with a special formula to Lin Yoxian's badly mutilated back and then threw the medicine directly to him. If you can move, get up and apply the medicine by yourself. Lin Yuxian, who had goosebumps all over his body, hummed and climbed up, and applied the ointment with trembling hands. Li Tianlan rummaged through the medicine box again and threw 2 bottles of internal healing potions at her. You should also have healing potions, right? It's all destroyed. Lin Yuxian said angrily, damn it. Even if it is not destroyed, everything will be gone when you wave your hand just now. Li Tianlan smiled, took off his severely damaged white clothes and moved his body. I'll stay here for the next few days. I don't have Zhongzhou state nationality. Even if I did, I couldn't go to the final maneuver to help you. Lin Yuxian was silent for a while and suddenly said, all right. Li Tianlan put the white clothes in his hand on the sofa beside him and sat down. The bloodstains on his body slowly stopped, and intense pain began to spread from every corner of his body. Lin Yoxian's face was a little pale, but he was relieved. He could feel anything even if it was pain. It was much better than being numb. He quietly recalled the collision of his sword with Gu Xingyun tonight. The sea in the 10th unique domain. The light after shattering the heavens. The light and the sea intertwined and surged. The entire scene was constantly being broken down. The sea became sword intent, and the light also became sword intent. The scene became clearer and clearer. Every time the sword intent trembled, it was like a spiritual light that attacked his soul. Lin Yuxian was in a trance. The sword intent kept replaying in his mind. The clear sword intent once again became the sea and the light. He suddenly remembered a saying. The mountain was a mountain and the water was water. The mountain was not a mountain and the water was not water. The mountain was still a mountain and the water was still water. In the sword intent that had become the light and the sea again, the white clothes suddenly appeared in the middle of the light and the sea. He himself was like the sword intent but also like nothingness. He gently pointed. One finger to break the sea. Lin Yuxian was suddenly shocked, and his closed eyes opened again. It was not until he recalled that moment in his mind that he suddenly found that Li Tianlan's state at that moment was so deep and vast. He suddenly appeared in the sword intent of shattering the heavens and the 10th unique domain silently. Existence had form. But Lin Yuxian couldn't tell the form of Li Tianlan's existence at that moment. He was nothingness like a sword intent but also like the air. He clearly existed but there was no trace. Lin Yuxian took a deep breath. From the stabilization phase of the thunder-shocking realm to the peak, He had been stuck for 2 years. Tonight there seemed to be an extremely huge opportunity. He hesitated for a moment but still asked, Tianlan, what realm are you in now? I don't know. Li Tianlan shook his head. It can be regarded as the invincible realm, but it can also be regarded as no realm. My path is different from yours, so it's hard to give me an accurate position in the chi-controlling realm, the ice-condensing realm, the fire-flaming realm, the thunder-shocking realm, the half-step invincible realm, and even the invincible realm. The realm is fake, and it's good that my combat capability is there. A completely different path. Lin Yuxian froze for a moment. He knew that Li Tianlan's path was different from today's martial arts, but the so-called different and completely different were two different concepts. All of Lin Yuxian's words were stuck in his throat. How precious was a completely different path of martial arts. It seemed that the relationship between him and Li Tianlan was not enough to share such a secret. Li Tianlan didn't mind this. The Lin clan and the Li family were of the same origin, and they stood together this time. When Lin Yuxian needed to answer questions, he didn't mind saying more. Since he made basic level of martial arts, there were really few young people who were qualified to discuss martial arts with him. The most tragic thing was that they were all enemies. Lin Yuxian was undoubtedly the best topic. What is martial arts? Li Tianlan looked at Lin Yuxian and asked seriously. Martial arts is the sword. Lin Yuxian answered without hesitation. Li Tianlan smiled and his eyes were warm. There was no doubt that this was the Lin clan's martial arts philosophy. Because they were of the same origin, this was also the Li family's martial arts philosophy. In the hearts of the Li family and the Lin clan, the so-called martial arts were swords. This is our internal statement. In the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City, there are also different opinions among them. Li Tianlan smiled and said, in the Wang family of Beihai, martial arts is about breaking out. In Kunlun City, martial arts is the formation, which is the essence of our unique skills. In the eyes of many people who don't have powerful legacies, the so-called martial arts is the rise of realms. What's wrong with that? Lin Yuxian wondered. That's right. Li Tianlan nodded. We just have different ideas. In my opinion, the so-called martial Tao is invincibility. Only invincibility. The martial way was invincible. Lin Yuxian shuddered all over. Sword chi, explosiveness, sword formations, and the pursuit of a higher level. They are all correct, but they are all fake. Isn't our ultimate goal of practicing martial arts to be invincible in the world? If we don't even have this goal with such courage, even if we practice martial arts, we can only be non-entities. So martial arts is the combat capability, invincibility. We pursue sword intent, the Wang family of Beihai pursues explosiveness, and Kunlun City pursues sword formations. Our absolute arts all have their own essence. Unlike most people who only pursue realms, our battle prowess can far surpass others of the same realm. We have enough confidence to laugh at them because they only care about pursuing realms and don't seriously temper themselves. This is putting the cart before the horse. Li Tianlan said calmly, in fact, it's quite ridiculous. When we laughed at them before, why didn't we reflect on ourselves? Sword intent is the essence of the Li family and the Lin clan. It is the key to the road to invincibility left by the patriarch. The so-called inheritance is just the key. We practice martial arts to be invincible in the world. When we laugh at others for not paying attention to honing themselves, how many people have thought about whether we have forgotten our original intention? Sword intent is our essence, but we've always pursued pure sword intent and we've limited ourselves. Is the martial arts we pursue sword intent? Ridiculous. It is invincibility. From the beginning to the end, it should be invincibility. Sword intent is just an inheritance. It is not a goal we pursue, but a tool on the way to our pursuit of invincibility. The Lin clan and the Li family never lack talented people, and so does the Wang family of Beihai. Why haven't we had a chosen one with real absolute dominance in the dark world for hundreds of years? That's because in the process of gradually becoming stronger, they all got into a dead end and couldn't get out. Lin Yuxian's face became paler. He should have been extremely cold due to excessive blood loss, but now his head was full of cold sweat. He suddenly remembered the thought that almost made him break through just now. In his memory, Gu Xingyun's 10th unique domain, his break of the sky, all of them were sword intent. Only sword intent. Martial arts. He also got into a dead end of pursuing sword intent. As his sword intent grew stronger, his martial arts seemed to be farther and farther away from him. Lin Fengting's face was completely pale. I also use a sword. Li Tianlan whispered, but in my opinion my sword is a sword. Without a sword I can use a saber. Without a saber I can kill people with my fists. There is no right or wrong in martial arts. You have a great reason, but you can't be invincible in the world. That's wrong. You don't know shit, but you will be invincible in the world in the end. That's right. In the so-called martial arts, strength is supreme. Isn't that so? What is your current kendo? Lin Yuxian recalled Li Tianlan's sword intent. The Li family's sword intent was sharp and fierce, while the Wang family of Beihai's sword intent was turbulent and explosive. What about Li Tianlan? His sword intent was incomparably illusory, but it was extremely real. Heaven-cutting style. Sea-breaking style. Whether it was real or illusory in terms of conception, it seemed to be a notch higher than sharpness and explosive. What is kendo? Li Tianlan laughed and his voice was extremely firm. Kendo is kendo. That's all. From simplicity to complexity, from complexity to simplicity, returning to simplicity. The mountain was still the mountain and the water was still the water. To be specific, my path is different from yours. My path starts with the invincible realm. I was like a sudden thunder at the age of 17 and recultivated. At the age of 19, I temporarily entered the invincible realm and made great achievements. I have experienced the scenery of the 4 realms of martial arts and the invincible realm, which is also a very precious wealth. It is also the foundation of my invincible realm, so recultivation is still a realm. Li Tianlan whispered, if I really want to divide my martial arts into realms, I would like to call my 2 recultivation nirvana realm. That is, the foundation of the invincible realm. If the foundation is solid, I need to accumulate power and pursue the momentum of the invincible realm. After the general trend is formed, it is time to ask the heart. With the heart of the invincible realm, the essence, chi and spirit are completely condensed, and that is the final detachment. Martial arts itself depends on itself. The foundation of the invincible realm. The momentum of the invincible realm. The heart of the invincible realm. Finally, it transcended. At that time, Lin Yuxian muttered to himself, at that time, can I still be in the invincible realm? Chapter 363. Lin Yuxian did not deny this. Li Tianlan's martial arts were clearly in front of him. If Li Tianlan was right, when he reached the end he would be truly invincible in the world. What he wanted was the real invincibility, not the simple invincible realm. This was Li Tianlan's boldness. Lin Yuxian could not speak for a long time. Li Tianlan said a lot, but compared with martial arts it was very little, but the impact on him was unparalleled. Martial arts, sword intent, inheritance, unique skills, invincibility. All kinds of concepts were so clear that the opportunity for him to break through the peak of the thundershocking realm was right in front of him. This opportunity was even enough to affect his road to the invincible realm in the future. This was the grandest and most distant martial arts. Heaven and earth were like a cage. Even if one was invincible, it was difficult to transcend. Only the real transcendence could be called Tao. Thank you. Lin Yuxian looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously. His eyes were a little complicated and self-deprecating. There were young chosen ones in Zhongzhou state, and naturally there were also in Europe and America. This small circle of young and top people almost represented the top combat capability of the dark world in the next few decades. Lin Yuxian thought that he was not worse than anyone, but at this time he suddenly felt a little ridiculous. Including himself, when all of them were confident that they could become the chosen one of the generation, they did not even figure out martial arts. How ridiculous was that? Lin Yuxian vaguely seemed to see his own path, but the real chosen one had already walked on the most correct path and was far ahead of everyone else. He shook his head subconsciously with a complicated mood. Did you get something? Li Tianlan asked. Lin Yuxian nodded seriously and said, Li Tianlan laughed and was a little happy. Come on, he said. It could be foreseen that, with the relationship between the Lin clan and the Li family, Lin Yuxian would be his absolute ally when Qin Weibai controlled the Lin clan in the future. An ally with no problems in terms of combat capability, potential, family background, and position. Lin Yuxian's continuous strength was more in line with Li Tianlan's interests. So now, is the 24 moves of sword completely useless to you? Lin Yuxian asked. How is it possible? Li Tianlan smiled and said, without the 24 moves of sword, I would not have today's sword intent. This supreme art was the best path to invincibility, but it was not the path to becoming a heavenly talent. Back then our ancestral master was no weaker than a heaven's chosen. That was because this sword Tao was created by him. Since it's self-created, it's naturally the most suitable for me. My sword Dao isn't perfect yet. It only has 9 forms. Cutting the heavens and breaking the seas are among them. There are still 2 comprehensive styles. Everything has just begun. After I perfect it, I don't know whether my kendo will only have 1 style or it will surpass the 24 moves of sword in number. Lin Yuxian nodded thoughtfully. He felt that he had overlooked something but he couldn't put his finger on it. He turned around and went upstairs. This villa built by the water had not been inhabited for a long time, so it was inevitable that some dust had accumulated in the bedroom. There was a row of men's clothes in the closet, all of which were customized according to Li Tianlan's body shape. They were so new that even the labels were not torn off. Li Tianlan wiped the blood on his body, changed his clothes, went downstairs, and threw another set to Lin Yuxian. Make do with it. When you get better I'll buy a suitable one. Lin Yuxian took the clothes and put them on. He tidied up his cuffs but out of the corner of his eye, he saw Li Tianlan sitting on the sofa, staring at the white clothes. What a pity. Li Tianlan said softly, his tone full of regret. Cloud silk was a well-deserved treasure in the dark world. Not to mention its function of being warm in winter and cool in summer, its incredible tenacity was enough to make any master crazy. At least half of the power below the thunder-shocking realm could be resisted by cloud silk. Even in the fight with Gu Qianchuan just now, Gu Qianchuan's less than half of the power was neutralized by cloud silk. Less than half, it didn't sound much, but it was a battle of the invincible realm. Cloud silk can be repaired. In terms of the technical level of Zhongzhou state, the Dongqing clan can do this and it won't take too long. About a month should be enough. Lin Yuxian looked at the broken white clothes with some envy. The most precious thing about cloud silk was not its tenacious defense, but its rarity. It could only be found by chance. Zhongzhou state was now the world's most powerful country, with vast land and abundant resources. But there were only 4 clothes made purely of cloud silk, not counting Li Tianlan's. They were the 4 spirits armor which was famous in the dark world. Samsara Palace had sacrificed a lot of manpower and material resources to get these cloud silk, but they gave them to Li Tianlan after getting them. Lin Yuxian was quite envious of Qin Weibai's deep love for Li Tianlan at all costs, and he admired the generosity of the master of Samsara Palace. If the master of Samsara Palace, who held the murderous weapon Blue Sky Underworld, put on this clothes, her strength could even go to a higher level. Li Tianlan nodded, put away the cloud silk and said slowly, "Give it to Rushi first. Repair it as soon as possible. I guess it will be used soon. After the final maneuver, I may go to Snow Country." Snow Country. Lin Yuxian nodded instinctively, but as soon as he said it, he suddenly froze. He finally realized what he had ignored. Tonight, all this was so exciting that he ignored the final maneuver. Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, and Jiang Shangyu teamed up to deal with Li Tianlan in the final maneuver. Li Tianlan had just cut off one of Gu Qianchuan's arms. And he forced Gu Xingyun, who had recovered some strength, to flee. When they came back, Lin Yuxian could clearly see the blood all over Li Tianlan's body. In his current state, could he still participate in the final maneuver? "How are your injuries?" Lin Yuxian hesitated. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and rolled up his cuffs. There was still some dark red blood on his arm, and there was a wound that had just been torn. But at this moment, his wound was no longer bleeding, and it began to heal gradually. Lin Yuxian opened his eyes wide. "My internal injury is not serious, and the external injury has begun to heal. It's not a big problem." Li Tianlan paused and continued, "I'll be fine after a sleep." Lin Yuxian was silent for a long time. Then he took a deep breath and scolded with a smile, "CK, I have seen the videos of your previous 2 moves. I thought your physical strength was your biggest weakness. Now it seems ridiculous." Weakness. Li Tianlan was stunned and did not speak. His martial arts had reached the basic level, and his sword intent had already taken shape. But it was just the beginning. His strongest point right now was his body. Lin Yuxian slowly stood up from the sofa and went upstairs alone. "I should be able to break through these days. If you are not here, I will go to the East Emperor Palace to find you." Li Tianlan said. Lin Yuxian went upstairs, found a room at random and went in. Li Tianlan's interpretation of martial arts and his own understanding of martial arts constantly collided with dazzling aura and sparks in his mind. Lin Yuxian sat on the bed, closed his eyes, concentrated and calmed down. In the endless aura he gradually entered the state of meditation. At the moment when his consciousness returned to concentration and purity, Lin Yuxian suddenly thought of his sword again. That sword was not the break of the sky. It was the ninth blade, Dusk. The sword that should have pierced Gu Xingyun's body eventually pierced the girl's chest. At that time in the dim yellow sky, Lin Yuxian did not see the girl's appearance clearly. Now in retrospect he only felt that the girl's eyes were so bright and delicate. He did not know how the girl was now. The one upstairs was meditating and the one downstairs was contemplating. The lights in the hall gradually went out. Li Tianlan stood in front of the window and quietly looked at Winter Mountain outside the Silver Lake Villa. It was late at night outside the window. Lights were everywhere on Winter Mountain. It had been nearly 3 hours since Gu Xingyun was attacked, but things did not subside. Instead they became more and more intense. More and more people came to Winter Mountain. Li Tianlan watched silently, but he was calculating the gains and losses of tonight. He wanted to kill Gu Xingyun, but Gu Xingyun escaped. It was unexpected but reasonable. As an invincible realm expert who ranked 5th on the divine list, no matter how poor he was, he would have the ability to save his life at the critical moment. Li Tianlan felt a little regretful, but he was not upset. Gu Qianchuan lost an arm, which seemed to be a gain. But Li Tianlan was very clear that if he was decisive enough at that time and did not chase Gu Xingyun, Gu Qianchuan, an expert on the holy list with a broken arm, would probably die tonight. However, if he killed Gu Qianchuan and missed the time to chase, Lin Yuxian would also die. Tonight's battle seemed to be reckless, but the consequences should not be too serious. The army came to Winter Mountain, which proved that the attack on Gu Xingyun was no longer a secret. But the most important thing was whether Gu Xingyun would say that the person who attacked him was him. Once Gu Xingyun said that he attacked him, all the majesty of Kunlun City would collapse in an instant. More than 20 years ago, they worked hard to overthrow the Li family with everything they had. More than 20 years later, a descendant of the Li family who had not yet grown up, broke the arm of the second in Kunlun City and made the god of war of Zhongzhou state flee? This matter was a joke no matter how he looked at it. Of course Li Tianlan was also very sober. If Gu Xingyun had absolute certainty to nail him, even if the majesty of Kunlun City was gone, he would still identify him. Attacking the god of war of Zhongzhou state. Such a crime could be regarded as treason. If Gu Xingyun had conclusive evidence, he could absolutely use the whole Zhongzhou state to completely crush him and the Li family. But the problem was that he could not produce enough evidence. He wore a mask tonight. Such a ridiculous cover could play a big role at a critical moment. He did not use the 24 moves of sword of the Li family. All the sword intent returned to nothingness. Except for Lin Yuxian, no one around him knew his plan tonight. As long as he left Winter Mountain, Kunlun City could not produce any evidence. Perhaps Kunlun City would use its own power to nail him to death, but now the Li family was no longer fighting alone. The giant group would not sit idly by, and the academics would no longer have an ambiguous attitude on this kind of thing. Instead they would clearly support him. In this way this matter might not be too small, but in the final analysis, it was just a quarrel at the meeting of the decision-making committee. Kunlun City was even very likely not to tell him, but to secretly retaliate. But Gu Qianchuan was not to be feared. Gu Xingyun, Li Tianlan smiled. He did miss the opportunity to kill Gu Qianchuan tonight. But he also got a lot. At least, the result tonight was in line with his expectations. It was a pity that Gu Xingyun did not die, but it was not unacceptable. At the symposium, he had roughly confirmed the degree of Gu Xingyun's serious injury, so he took action tonight. After tonight, Gu Xingyun forced his seriously injured body to burst out his strength, and his injury would be more serious. Even if Gu Xingyun could not die, he could not recover in a short time. It could be foreseen that at least in the next 3 to 5 years, the threat from the absolute strength of Kunlun City that he had to face would become minimal. The pressure that the Li family and he had to face was directly reduced by half. The Wang family of Beihai was still so powerful that it made people desperate. But optimistically, the current situation was much better than the alliance between the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. Without the threat of Kunlun City, the Li family could also put more energy on the Wang family of Beihai. Compared with losing the opportunity to kill Gu Qianchuan, it was more worthwhile to prolong Gu Xingyun's recovery period. Li Tianlan clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "It's worth it." Between gains and losses, whether it was worth it or not, once there was a clear result, there would be no choice. The sky gradually brightened. The morning sun leaped out of the sea and the sky was clear. The sun shone on Mount Dibbing with birds chirping and flowers. The verdant and bright Mount Dibbing was quiet and peaceful, just like a paradise. Wang Yuetong quietly cleaned her room. Her movements were careful and serious, and she did not miss any corner. This was a room full of the soft atmosphere of a young girl. It was large but not empty. The pale pink walls were warm and soft. The hazy gauze curtain fluttered with the fresh sea breeze blowing through the window. The wind chimes hanging in the room made a pleasant sound. The room was full of large and small plush toys. Some of them were a little old, but they were very clean. Wang Yuetong finished cleaning the room and put all the plush toys one by one. Looking at the spotless bedroom, her eyes were very sad, but there was a hint of a smile in them. A small suitcase was placed at her feet. There were only a few sets of clothes in the suitcase. In fact, there was nothing to pack. She came back this time just to have a look. This room, this palace, this mountain, and even the whole province. When she came back again, she did not know when it would be. "Tong, have you really made up your mind?" A soft and gentle voice sounded behind Wang Yuetong. Summer Solstice walked into the room and reached out to gently stroke Wang Yuetong's short hair. Her eyes were doting and complicated. "Yes." Wang Yuetong nodded hard. "Young people are so naive." Summer Solstice sighed softly and said, "I believe Li Tianlan likes you. But can you be sure whether he loves you or not? The positions between you are destined to bear unimaginable pressure and even torture when you are together in the future. Can you imagine that kind of pain?" "I know." Wang Yuetong whispered, "I have thought about these problems very seriously. But I really can't let him go. It may not be easy in the future, but if I give up on him, maybe my life will be more difficult. Mom, I have decided." Her voice lowered, "I really have decided." Summer Solstice sighed softly, took out a card and gave it to Wang Yuetong. Wang Yuetong shook her head subconsciously. This time when she returned to the Wang family of Beihai, although it was not to break off the relationship with the family, it basically meant leaving the family with nothing. This card was the wealth of the Wang family of Beihai. How could she take it? "Take it as the dowry I prepared for you," Summer Solstice said with a smile. She had said too much to persuade her, but her daughter had made it clear that she wanted to go all the way. No matter how much she said, it would not work. "Take it." Summer Solstice put the card in her daughter's hand, blinked and whispered, "This is my private money. In the future, treat yourself better when you are outside. Silly girl, no matter what happens, don't wrong yourself, especially when you get along with Li Tianlan. Don't give in unconditionally. The feelings between a man and a woman are simple and complicated. It's okay once or twice, but how can there be happiness if you feel wronged too much? If you are not happy, the couple will become a couple with resentment. I don't know what will happen to you in the future, but anyway, you have to remember that this is what you are willing to give up everything for. For a woman, such an opportunity only comes once in her life, and it is a big gamble. If you win, you will be happy. If you lose, your heart will die. Tong, no matter what will happen to you in the future, even if you can't be together and become enemies, I don't want you to hate him. I'm not optimistic about him, but I feel sorry for you. Hating a person is often harder than loving a person." Wang Yuetong blinked desperately, nodded silently and whispered, "Mom, I won't hate him and I won't regret it." Summer Solstice smiled again and whispered, "Well, if you are unhappy in the future, you can come back. You are our daughter. We are a family and we don't need to apologize. If he is not good to you, tell me and I will find someone to deal with him." Wang Yuetong took a deep breath and did not speak. She bent down to pick up the suitcase on the ground and quickly walked out of the room. Summer Solstice looked at her daughter's back and sighed softly. There seemed to be a faint exclamation downstairs. Summer Solstice walked out of the room. In her sight, her daughter had reached the hall downstairs. At this time, her husband was standing quietly in front of her. Summer Solstice wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, she kept silent. Wang Yuetong looked at her father in front of her in a panic. Wang Tianzong's face was calm without the slightest emotion. His eyes swept over the suitcase in Wang Yuetong's hand. Wang Yuetong's body trembled slightly, and she subconsciously wanted to let go of her hand. But then she realized what it meant. Her face turned pale and she held the suitcase tightly. "Dad." Wang Yuetong called softly. She glanced at her father and whispered, "I'm leaving." "Where are you going?" Wang Tianzong asked. "To Huading." Wang Yuetong bit her lip. Thinking of her destination and her man, she seemed to have more courage. "I'm going to find Tianlan." A few hours ago, Li Tianlan attacked Gu Xingyun in Huading. Gu Qianchuan's arm was destroyed by him, and Gu Xingyun was injured again. I have to admit that I was wrong at that time. Even in my eyes, Li Tianlan is now a big shot. You have a good taste in men. Wang Tianzong showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. Not only Wang Yuetong but also Summer Solstice, who heard the news, was shocked and had an incredible expression on her face. Wang Yuetong was not surprised but panicked. She didn't think about Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan at all. She just asked subconsciously, "How is Tianlan?" "I don't know." Wang Tianzong shook his head. Wang Yuetong said nothing and was about to go out. Wang Tianzong reached out and stopped his daughter. "Stay here for a few days," Wang Tianzong said calmly. Wang Yuetong's body stiffened. She looked at Wang Tianzong's expression, and her face gradually turned pale. "I don't object to you going to Huading," Wang Tianzong said lightly, "but that's after the final maneuver. At that time, if Li Tianlan can survive, I will respect your choice." Wang Yuetong's eyes gradually dimmed. Her father said that if Li Tianlan could survive, but in his tone Wang Yuetong only heard the killing intent. "Tianlan can destroy Gu Qianchuan's arm. My brother is no match for Tianlan." Wang Yuetong bit her lip and said, "He may win." Wang Tianzong said calmly, "But he must not survive. If he wins the final maneuver, I will personally send him to hell." He said the last sentence resolutely and decisively, leaving no room for negotiation. Wang Yuetong's face was so pale that it seemed transparent. "You stay at home." Wang Tianzong said, "Everything will wait until the end of the maneuver." He turned around and walked to the gate. Wang Yuetong stared at his back in a daze. Wang Tianzong's figure walked out of the gate and disappeared into the bright sunshine outside. His figure seemed to be shining with a layer of golden light. The gate of the palace was slowly closed. Wang Yuetong suddenly screamed and seemed to use all her strength. "If you kill my man, I will hate you for the rest of my life. I hate you. I hate you." Wang Tianzong's footsteps suddenly froze for a moment. His face seemed to flash with a touch of blue. Wang Yuetong's scream was still echoing. Wang Tianzong did not look back and slowly walked down the steps in front of the palace. A man in black stood at the foot of the steps. Seeing Wang Tianzong come out, he bent down and said respectfully, "Your Majesty." "Say it." Wang Tianzong's voice was very cold. "We have confirmed the headquarters of the Samsara Palace." The black-clothed man's body trembled as he quickly spoke. His code name was Xian Ming, and he was responsible for managing all the intelligence agencies of the Wang family of Beihai. "Are you sure?" Wang Tianzong asked. "Yes, I'm sure," Xian Ming said in a deep voice. Wang Tianzong twitched the corner of his mouth, took a deep breath and said, "Let's go now." He left the palace behind him with steady steps. In the palace, Wang Yuetong's hoarse and desperate cries were faintly heard. Wang Tianzong's eyes were complicated, but his footsteps did not stop. Wang Yuetong had a good eye. Li Tianlan was really strong. But Li Tianlan was an enemy. The stronger he was, the faster he would die. Wang Tianzong had made up his mind that if Li Tianlan really won the final maneuver, he would directly kill Li Tianlan on the spot. Even if Lin Fengting fell out with him and fought with him, he would not give in at all. In today's era, if he wanted to kill a person, no one in the whole dark world could stop him. Not Lin Fengting. Not even deity. He had made up his mind at all costs. So he would not pay attention to Li Tianlan. In the final maneuver a few days later, no matter how dazzling he was, he would just kill him with a sword. As long as he killed Li Tianlan, there would be no shadow in the future of the Wang family of Beihai. If he killed him, Wang Tianzong would only get infinite opportunities and light in the future. What he would lose would be the father-daughter relationship for more than 20 years. Chapter 364. A big chapter of 8,000 words, you know? The cold wind never stopped blowing through the mountains. The vast snow was dancing in the air almost forever. It was lonely, monotonous, and cold. Whether it was wind, frost, rain, or snow, whether it was midsummer or winter, the wind and snow here seemed to be always unchanged, with a desolation that seemed to howl to the end of the world. There was a mountain in the snow. There was a city at the foot of the mountain. The exquisite and quaint black city was silent under the snow, black and white, looking extremely mysterious and majestic. Strong wind, heavy snow, high mountains, and black city. Under the sky that seemed to be always gloomy in the northwest, this was an extremely shocking picture. Gu Xingyun stood on the top of the mountain facing the wind and snow. Kunlun was very big. But this mountain was the highest mountain in a radius of 100 miles. Standing here, the city was at his feet, the mountain was at his feet, and the whole world seemed to be crawling under his feet. Such a high position, Huading, Yuzhou, and all corners of the world were close at hand. Gu Xingyun could feel his absolute strength and see the absolute glory of Kunlun City. Zhongzhou State had already stood at the commanding heights of the world. And Kunlun City was at the highest point of Zhongzhou State. He stood at the peak of Kunlun City, looking down at the world. He had great achievements and unparalleled martial arts. Gu Xingyun laughed. His laughter easily passed through the heaven and earth, and echoed among the mountains and snow. Blood flowed behind him. Dozens of corpses fell behind him, and blood stained a large area of snow. Gu Xingyun turned to look at the corpses. There were not many corpses, but they all had different appearances and figures. Every one of them represented the peak power in the world. Every weapon was a famous magic weapon in the dark world. But now the weapons were broken, and the so-called invincibility all became corpses. Gu Xingyun looked at his arm. There was a black arm guard wrapped around his arm, ferocious and gloomy. This was the human emperor, known as the first murderous weapon in the dark world. Gu Xingyun continued to laugh wildly, arrogantly and presumptuously. At his feet, the famous sword of the Wang family of Beihai, Listen to the Sea, had been broken into 2 pieces. The body of Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong of Zhongzhou State was almost completely submerged in the wind and snow. After Wang Tianzong, it was Li Honghe, Li Guangtu deity Lin Fengting, the master of Samsara Palace, tyrant of the Polar Ground Alliance, Saint War Angel Arcis of the Vatican, Cass Rotter, the god of war of Star State. Each and every famous name had now become a dead man. Gu Xingyun sneered and admired his work. He looked at the corpses one by one, and his expression became more and more satisfied. From beginning to end, when he saw the last corpse, Gu Xingyun frowned. He felt like he had overlooked something. It seemed like there was someone missing from these corpses. Who is missing? Who is still alive? He counted again. Wang Tianzong, Li Honghe, Li Guangtu, Summer Solstice, Situ Cangyue, and even Li Shi's body were here. He couldn't remember who was missing. Gu Xingyun snorted coldly and said in a cold tone, "They should all be killed." He looked at the horizon. A ball of orange light lit up at the end of the gloomy and snowy world. The moment he entered his line of sight, the orange light suddenly spread out and turned into an endless raging fire. The fire burned the whole sky. The biting cold wind and flying snow all stopped. The burning sky slowly pressed down, the mountains were collapsing, and Heiqing was on the verge of collapse. Gu Xingyun's body seemed to have lost all its strength in an instant. He could only watch the fire full of destruction falling down and wrapping him up completely. Heiqing suddenly collapsed completely. In the loud roar, the world was dark. Gu Xingyun suddenly opened his eyes and sat up from the bed. It was sunny outside the window. The bright light shone through the window and the room was clean and refreshing. Gu Xingyun's eyes were white, and his mouth and nose were full of the pungent smell of hospital disinfectant. He gasped for breath, and it took him a long time to realize that he had just experienced a dream. In the dream he was powerful enough to overturn the whole world. The 6 groups in Zhongzhou State suffered heavy losses under his operation. The Li family and the Wang family of Beihai at their peak were destroyed by him, and all the superpowers in the world surrendered at his feet. At that time he was very young, high-spirited, and arrogant. That was the most wonderful dream. But now looking back in the constantly disappearing dream, Gu Xingyun could only feel fear. It was like the fear after experiencing the most terrible nightmare. His heart beat wildly, his head was covered with cold sweat and his mouth was dry. He took a deep breath and suddenly got up to find water. But as soon as he moved, the tearing pain all over his body suddenly made him fall off the bed. His body trembled violently and his mind was blank, but his heart was completely sober. He forgot the nightmare and remembered the night when he was attacked. Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan. Gu Xingyun gritted his teeth, endured the severe pain in his body, and moved back to the bed little by little. Like a wounded beast, he gasped deeply. Everything in his sight became completely clear. The room he was in was a ward. It seemed to be a single room, but at this time there were 3 beds side by side. His bed was in the middle, and on the left was Li Qingqing in a hospital gown. The young girl, who had just turned 20 this year, was pale, and her long eyelashes blinked uneasily. The sun fell on her with a kind of beautiful charm. She seemed to be in pain, but her breathing became steady. Gu Xingyun breathed a sigh of relief and looked at his unconscious daughter with complicated eyes. He turned his head and looked at the right side. Gu Qianchuan on the right side was also unconscious. Gu Xingyun glanced at him casually, and his movements suddenly froze. He stared at Gu Qianchuan lying on the bed. Gu Qianchuan was motionless, but there was nothing in the cuff of his clothes. Gu Xingyun had an incredible expression, as if he had seen a ghost in the daytime. There were hurried footsteps outside the door. The ward was pushed open, and a middle-aged man walked quickly into the ward with a solemn face. The man was handsome, but there was a very eye-catching scar on his face. He was slightly short and wore a lieutenant general's military uniform, looking extremely fierce and domineering. "Your Highness, are you okay?" The lieutenant general reached out and shook hands with Gu Xingyun, looking sincere and serious. But Gu Xingyun clearly saw a touch of gloating mockery in the other party's eyes. "I'm okay." Gu Xingyun's tone was cold. Yi Fengqing, the director of Huading Special Operations Bureau. He was one of the backbone generals of the Wang family of Beihai. Among the experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in Zhongzhou State, his strength might not be the top, but he was a famous madman. Gu Xingyun was attacked in Huading, so Yi Fengqing naturally had to visit him because of his position. "It's good that you're okay." Yi Fengqing smiled, pulled a chair at random and sat down opposite Gu Xingyun. "Minister Zhang Qi is still investigating in Mount Dong. I have to say that the person who attacked you and Marshal Gu Qianchuan last night was really bold, but we haven't got too many clues yet. I wonder if you can provide us with some useful information? Oh, by the way, how many of your guards survived? I heard from them that you mentioned Li Tianlan's name." Gu Qianchuan's face changed and he took a deep look at Yi Fengqing. Yi Fengqing still smiled, but the mockery in his eyes was undisguised. He said meaningfully, "Is it true that the god of war in Zhongzhou State was seriously injured by a young man?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Gu Xingyun narrowed his eyes. He thought of everything last night, took a deep breath and made up his mind in a short time. "I haven't seen Li Tianlan. I don't know the person who attacked me last night. This needs your Huading Special Operations Bureau to investigate. If you are short of manpower, you can report to the Special Warfare Headquarters, and Kunlun City can directly intervene." Gu Xingyun's voice was a little distorted and depressed. God knew how aggrieved he was when he said this. But he really didn't have enough evidence to pin Li Tianlan. If he continued to make trouble, the whole Kunlun City would become a joke for Li Tianlan's prestige. He could only hold back his anger. "We'll try our best." Yi Fengqing smiled, stood up and said, "That's it. Your Highness, have a good rest. I've informed Secretary Zhong and he will come to visit later." He turned and left the ward, his back unrestrained. Gu Xingyun looked at Yi Fengqing's back with a gloomy face, and the corners of his mouth twitched. After a long time, he muttered to himself, "This matter will not end like this." He couldn't find evidence to pin Li Tianlan. But Kunlun City now had far more strength than the Li family, and it had the same position as the Wang family of Beihai. If he couldn't find evidence, then he wouldn't look for it. He must die. He must die. This bastard, cut him into pieces and feed him to the dogs. A hoarse, painful voice with great resentment suddenly sounded in Gu Xingyun's ear. Gu Xingyun turned his head. On the bed on his right, Gu Qianchuan had woken up. He tightly covered his shoulder with one arm missing. His eyes were chaotic and his whole face was distorted. He was ferocious and almost crazy. Gu Xingyun's heart was filled with anger. He was attacked and fled, but as long as he could hold on, the problem would not be very big. Gu Qianchuan's lost arm was the root of Kunlun City's disgrace. The arm of an invincible realm expert on the holy list was cut off by a young man. In addition to showing that Li Tianlan was amazing enough, it could only show the incompetence of Kunlun City. "How did you end up like this?" Gu Xingyun frowned and asked. Gu Qianchuan froze for a moment. He could hear the dissatisfaction in Gu Xingyun's tone. His face turned red in an instant, but he didn't know what to say. Was he careless? Or was he too concerned about Gu Xingyun's comfort? This explanation was objectively acceptable, but in Gu Xingyun's eyes, it undoubtedly showed that he was useless. Gu Qianchuan lowered his head and clenched his fists. "If you're okay, take Qingqing and leave Huading first," Gu Xingyun said calmly. Gu Qianchuan raised his head subconsciously. "What about you?" "Me?" Gu Xingyun laughed at himself. "I'm afraid that before dark, the news that I was seriously injured by Li Tianlan will spread throughout Zhongzhou State. If I don't show up, there are even many people who say that I'm dead. How can I go? Where can I go? I must stay to participate in the final maneuver. Before that, I can't go anywhere." If it was in normal times, Gu Xingyun naturally didn't care about these rumors. But now he was really seriously injured and he was destined not to show up for a long time. In this way, these rumors were deadly enough. So it was impossible for him to leave Huading now. Even if he had to hold on, he had to hold on to the final maneuver. "What about Li Tianlan? Are we just going to let it go?" Gu Qinchuan's tone was gloomy. Let it go? Gu Xingyun sneered. He will die. And he will die in the maneuver. He didn't tell Yi Fengqing that it was Li Tianlan who attacked him, and he was not going to tell anyone. But it didn't mean that he would let it go. Let it go? How could it be possible? Gu Xingyun lowered his head, took out his mobile phone from the bag containing his dirty clothes, and dialed a number. Kunlun. In the majestic black city standing in the wind and snow, a white and delicate palm pressed the answer button, but she did not take the initiative to speak. The two ends of the phone were separated by the city, the wind and snow, the mountains and rivers, and the sea. There was only silence and numbness. Gu Xingyun seemed to have adapted to the other party's attitude, so on the phone, his tone did not fluctuate at all. Come to Huading. His tone was close to a command. What's the matter? Li Shi held the mobile phone in her hand tightly and asked numbly. Kill a man for me. Gu Xingyun's tone was cold. Didn't you say that you had nothing to do with the Li family? Very well, in the final maneuver, I will give you a chance to prove yourself. I want you to kill Li Tianlan in person at the scene of the maneuver. I don't want to hear nonsense. Come here right now. In the case that he was seriously injured, it was difficult for Gu Qianchuan to check and balance Li Tianlan. Kunlun City did not have so many deep foundations and secret troops with amazing destructive power. Even if there were, Gu Xingyun did not want to waste them on Li Tianlan. It was the safest choice to let Li Shi do it. When everyone marveled that there were 3 invincible realm experts in the high-end combat capability of the Jiang family of South America, only a few people knew that there were also 3 invincible realm experts in Kunlun City. There were only 2 invincible realm experts left in the Jiang family of South America. And there were still 3 in Kunlun City. What few people knew was that, as the governor of Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun was not the strongest expert in Kunlun City. In terms of strength, Li Shi, who came from Kunlun City and was favored by Li Guangtu in those days, was the strongest expert in Kunlun City. She had the 10th unique domain and the 24 moves of sword in her body. The numb and silent madam of the governor was the strongest expert in Kunlun City. Li Shi was silent and did not speak for a long time. What? Bitch, you don't want to do it? Gu Xingyun's tone gradually became irritable. Li Shi's hand holding the phone was still trembling, and her face was so pale that it seemed transparent. I have done it. She tried hard to control her emotions. 3 years ago in Heaven Capital, I killed him once. But he is not dead. Gu Xingyun said in a cold tone. Then you kill him again and finish what you failed to do 3 years ago. Otherwise, I can't guarantee Qingqing's fate. Li Shi's face became paler. Qingqing. Qingqing again. Her trip to Heaven Capital 3 years ago was related to her daughter, Li Qingqing. At that time, if she did not go to Heaven Capital, Gu Xingyun would put Li Qingqing in Heaven Capital and even arrange her to be with Li Tianlan quietly. That result was equivalent to fundamentally determining Li Qingqing's fate in the future. Her daughter would repeat her path, and the old things would be reincarnated again. So she stopped Gu Xingyun and went to Heaven Capital in person. And recently, Gu Xingyun asked her to go to Huading, which was exactly the same threat as that year. It was very despicable. But it was absolutely effective. After the matter in Huading is over, you will go to Snow Country on behalf of Kunlun City. I will return your daughter to you afterward. Gu Xingyun said and hung up the phone directly. Li Shi seemed to be drained of all her strength in an instant. She put down the phone numbly. After a long silence, she slowly turned around and walked out of the door. The wind and snow outside the door were still howling. The whole black city looked more and more gloomy. A maid came over and said respectfully and cleverly, Madam? Prepare the helicopter. Li Shi said numbly, I'm going to Huading. In the era of explosive communication, any so-called intelligence was just a matter of a phone call or an email. If they were more cautious, it was just a matter of an encrypted phone call or an encrypted email. The attack on Gu Xingyun was a major event in Zhongzhou State. Major events were often not kept secret. So when the garrison of Huading, the police, and the Special Operations Bureau rushed to Winter Mountain together, Wang Xingxiao had already received a call from Yi Fengqing, the director of the Special Operations Bureau of Huading. When he received the call, Wang Xingxiao was still chatting with Song Ci in bed. But after listening to the content of the phone, Wang Xingxiao, who had been calm since he broke through to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, changed his face completely. He kept the weird posture of answering the phone. Until a long time after Yi Fengqing hung up the phone, his movements did not change at all. There was no anger, no jealousy, no unwillingness. He sat quietly, and his eyes were full of surprise, doubt, and bitterness. What's wrong? Song Si clearly noticed Wang Xingxiao's unusual behavior. She put on her pajamas and sat beside him. Wang Xingxiao was motionless and unresponsive. When Song Si asked for the third time, he took a deep breath and glanced at Song Si. You said? Wang Xingxiao's voice was a little erratic, but his eyes gradually became calm. If I fight with all my strength now, how strong can I be? Song Si was thoughtful. Wang Xingxiao was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. But he had a top inheritance and was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm with wind and thunder veins. Such a person was strong enough to crush and even defeat all opponents in the same realm in any realm. How strong was Wang Xingxiao? Song Si thought for a moment and said softly, if you fight with all your strength, you should be able to fight against the top half-step invincible realm now. Ordinary half-step invincible realm experts will not be your match. Really strong. Wang Xingxiao laughed, but it was a little self-deprecating. How am I now compared to Brother Jiang? Brother Jiang? Song Si was a little confused. She thought for a moment and said uncertainly, Milord Dijiang? Wang Xingxiao nodded. Milord Dijiang is His Majesty's disciple. Now he has the combat capability of the invincible realm. He is about to become the youngest marshal in Zhongzhou state. Compared with him, you are still a little worse. Song Si said cautiously. Yes, I am indeed a little worse. Wang Xingxiao whispered to himself, but compared with Gu Qianchuan, Brother Jiang is also a little worse. Song Si was silent. Although Dijiang with double thunder veins had not entered the invincible realm for the time being, compared with Gu Qianchuan who had just broken through the invincible realm, he should be on par or slightly stronger. But Gu Qianchuan had been in the invincible realm for 8 years. He had stabilized his realm, further understood the 10 skills of true martial arts, and successfully entered the holy list. Dijiang was not in the invincible realm, so he was indeed a little inferior to Gu Qianchuan. But just a few hours ago, Li Tianlan attacked the purple gold pavilion. He not only broke Gu Qianchuan's arm, but also forced Gu Xingyun to flee. Wang Xingxiao finally smiled bitterly, and his eyes became more and more confused. How did he do all this? Song Si's face changed dramatically. It was not a big deal to force Gu Xingyun to flee. Gu Xingyun had been seriously injured. But it was really incredible that he broke Gu Qianchuan's arm. Had Li Tianlan entered the invincible realm? How could a 22-year-old invincible realm expert bear such a huge force? It's fake. Song Si did not even think much and said instinctively. Wang Xingxiao glanced at her and did not speak. He could imagine how much influence the news would have after it spread throughout Zhongzhou state. A great uproar was not enough to describe it. If there was a word to describe it, it would be stormy waves. Li Tianlan still had potential. But after what happened tonight, he not only had potential, but his combat capability would also be recognized. He broke Gu Qianchuan's arm. Even if he was not in the invincible realm, he at least had the combat capability of the invincible realm. From now on, calling Li Tianlan Your Highness was really worthy of his name. And from today on, Li Tianlan had the value that all the young people, including Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan, did not have. How did the gap come about? How could it get farther and farther away? Wang Xingxiao did not know, but he knew very well that if he did not fight hard, he might not even be able to see Li Tianlan's back. If it's true, Song Si's face was a little pale and even a little panicked. Then in the final maneuver no. Wang Xingxiao whispered, he is really strong but not strong enough to make me retreat without a fight. But if you insist, who can guarantee that Gu Hanshan and Jiang Shangyu will also insist? Song Si's tone was hurried. They are them and I am me. Even if they all abstain, I will appear on the battlefield. If I don't even have the courage to fight, I don't know what the Wang family of Beihai will become under my leadership in the future. Wang Xingxiao glanced at Song Si calmly. It was already the early morning of the 24th. There was less than a week before the final maneuver. I want to meditate. Wang Xingxiao said, it's time to get ready. No matter the outcome, at least I still have half a sword to choose. Song Si's face kept changing. Wang Xingxiao did have half a sword to choose. 3 years ago in Heaven Capital, he had used the sword intent of firmament to use the half-six paths. 3 years later, he had stood at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and could barely use the half-reincarnation. Although it was the half-reincarnation. But as long as he drew his sword, Wang Xingxiao believed that even in the face of the invincible realm, he could be invincible. Dongqing Wudi flew back to Zhongyuan from Yuzhou overnight. But when the sun rose, Dongqing Hongguang, whose biological clock had always been very regular, went downstairs and saw his son in a marshal's uniform sitting in the dining room eating breakfast at first glance. Dongqing Wudi was dealing with the soup dumplings in front of him. He ate very slowly, chewing and swallowing slowly, but his movements were extremely firm. In front of Dongqing Hongguang he was a filial son. In front of Bai Qingqian he was an incompetent husband. But in front of the soldiers of Zhongzhou State, he was always the invincible god of massacre of Zhongzhou State. This was a man who could give people a feeling of indomitable will even when eating. Dongqing Hongguang, who had not slept in the second half of the night, gave up the plan to go out for a walk and walked into the dining room. He waved his hand, motioned his son who had stood up to sit down and asked casually, "When did you come back?" "Less than 2 hours." Dongqing Wudi swallowed the steamed bun and said calmly, "Did you hear the news last night?" Dongqing Hongguang picked up a steamed bun and whispered, "Yes." Dongqing Wudi laughed, with a kind of brilliance different from iron-blooded killing on his face. "Good boy," he cut off one of Gu Qianchuan's arms. Standing in front of him, I'm no longer his opponent. Amazing. If he grows up smoothly, he may really enter the invincible realm before the age of 30. Dongqing Hongguang also smiled, but there was some worry in his eyes. I said, the stronger he is, the more dangerous he is. If his injury last night was not serious, he should win in the final maneuver. But the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City? Kunlun City is not to be feared. Dongqing Wudi said, Gu Xingyun is seriously injured and Gu Qianchuan's arm is broken. There is no threat for the time being. Stupid. Dongqing Hongguang's eyes darkened and he said coldly, Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan are not a threat, but how can you be sure that woman will not take action? That woman? Dongqing Wudi's face changed and he was silent. In a sense, the woman's breakthrough into the invincible realm was the most important opportunity for Kunlun City to make up its mind to overthrow Li Guangtu. If she joins forces with the Wang family of Beihai, Shi and Wang Tianzong, how can Tianlan survive? Dongqing Hongguang said slowly. Dongqing Wudi picked up a steamed bun and put it in his mouth. He slowly bit the steamed bun and said slowly, it's okay. Dongqing Hongguang glanced at him. Tianlan is still young and there are some things that he should not bear. The younger generation's affairs should be solved by the younger generation. If they want to bully the weak, they have to ask for my permission. He sneered slightly. Wang Tianzong? And that woman? She is really strong. But what can she do no matter how strong she is? Have you made up your mind? Dongqing Hongguang's tone was light. It's not determination. Dongqing Wudi smiled. Dad, this is the most correct decision. We may give up something for the time being, but only temporarily. If I don't make this decision this time, when the truth comes out, the people of the Dongqing clan will be disunited. Dongqing Hongguang was silent. Hidden Dragon Sea. After a long silence he suddenly said, I've met with the president. Dongqing Wudi said calmly, the president will go abroad for a visit in a few days. Dongqing Hongguang's face relaxed and he said with a smile, what are you going to do? It's just a head-on confrontation. Dongqing Wudi said, I'm ready. In addition, I've contacted Qin Weibai, and she will secretly cooperate with me on some things. Qin Weibai. Dongqing Hongguang's eyes flashed with inexplicable brilliance. She is indeed a strange woman. She is now in Snow Country and I don't know what she is planning. Snow Country, troubled times, great changes are coming. Dongqing Wudi chuckled. The real storm is coming, hey? Dongqing Hongguang smiled and his tone was complicated. Snow Country Mormons? Qin Weibai was looking at a document sent from Zhongzhou State. In the spacious study, a figure shrouded in a black cloak was holding a copy and looking at it seriously. There was not much content in the document. So in just a few minutes, Qin Weibai had put the document on the desk. Is my man powerful? Qin Weibai patted the document gently. She seemed to be in a good mood and her laughter was a little loud. Tianlan is in danger. The voice of the man wrapped in a cloak was elegant. His figure looked like a military counselor or a saint, but there were some differences. He put down the copy in his hand, hesitated, and reached out to tear off the cloak on his body. He said helplessly, I'm really not used to this. How did the two military counselors and saint get used to this thing? After the cloak was taken off, a handsome and elegant face appeared in the study. A face that should have been in Lin, and at this time. The patriarch of the Lin clan, Lin Fengting. They're not used to it either. Qin Weibai said with a smile, but they have to hide their identities so they have to get used to it. As the patriarch of the Lin clan, if you don't enter the secular world, you have to suffer for a while. Lin Fengting shook his head helplessly and pointed to the document on the table. Once the news gets out, Tianlan will be in danger. Tianzong and Kunlun City will definitely not let him go. Maybe they will take action at the scene of the final maneuver. He paused and said, "Am I too early?" "It's okay." Qin Weibai shook her head with certainty. Her voice was very soft and her tone was very confident. Dongqing Wudi is trustworthy. As long as he is here, Tianlan will be fine. You can only protect him for a while in Zhongzhou State. It doesn't make much sense. As long as the deterrent of the Dongqing clan is still there, no one will dare to act rashly. Between the top force and the super-wealthy family, in terms of power, the super-wealthy family is better. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes and said softly, "Then what am I doing here now? It doesn't seem to make sense here. It's easier to find the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance from here. The Polar Ground Alliance is in civil strife, and the tyrant has become a coward. It's really not easy to find him. But I already have a clue, and there will be results in a few days. The final battle will be held in Snow Country, and the Polar Ground Alliance is the best signal." Qin Weibai said calmly. "You mean the final battle will be held in the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance?" Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows. "No." Qin Weibai shook her head and pointed to her feet. "The final battle will be held here. Snow Country, Mormon City." This was the final battle site that the Samsara Palace, which provoked the chaos in the Dark World, had set up 3 years ago. Lin Fengting just wanted to ask something and a phone suddenly rang. Qin Weibai looked at the number and answered the phone. "Boss." On the phone, a calm voice sounded. "The fish has taken the bait." Qin Weibai didn't say much and hung up the phone directly. Lin Fengting also heard the phone and asked subconsciously, "The fish has taken the bait. What do you mean?" "I sent someone to attack summer solstice. But I also said that I would give Wang Tianzong a chance to go crazy." Qin Weibai said softly, "So when I sent someone to find the headquarters of the Polar Ground Alliance, I deliberately used some bait to leak the headquarters of the Samsara Palace. Wang Tianzong has taken the bait." The headquarters of the Samsara Palace. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes. "What's there? A tight dragnet? A trap?" "There's nothing." Qin Weibai shook her head. "There's only one opportunity for the final battle." Lin Fengting was silent for a while and then said in a complicated tone, "If so, it's not necessarily the headquarters of the Samsara Palace, is it? It can be regarded as the headquarters." Qin Weibai said, "It's indeed the place where the core members of the Samsara Palace have been stationed for many years. It can be regarded as the headquarters." She hesitated, glanced at Lin Fengting and continued, "The real headquarters of the Samsara Palace is in Zhongzhou State. It has always been in Zhongzhou State. I put it in the most conspicuous position but no one can see it." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.